Hey there, storytellers and story lovers. This is Dark Harry. Prepare yourselves for today's incredible narrative. What if Merlin's ghost warned Dumbledore about the Addams family? He tried to ban them from Britain. A quick reminder, your likes, comments, and subscriptions are the fuel that keeps this channel running. Thank you for being awesome. Let's begin this journey together. Chapter 1, The Spectral Warning. The night sky above Hogwarts sparkled with an unusual intensity. Dumbledore stood at his office window, silver beard gleaming in the starlight, when the temperature plummeted. His breath clouded in front of his face as frost spiderwebbed across the glass. Curious, he murmured, drawing his wand. The portraits around him stirred nervously. Blue light erupted in the center of the room, swirling like mist before coalescing into a translucent figure. The spectre wore robes of an ancient design, his beard longer than even Dumbledore's, his eyes piercing with centuries of knowledge. Merlin, Dumbledore whispered, lowering his wand immediately. He bowed his head in respect. I never expected, silence, the ghost commanded, his voice echoing as though spoken from the bottom of a well. I bring a warning, Albus Dumbledore. A darkness approaches Britain's shores. Dumbledore straightened, his expression grave. Voldemort? Has he, not Riddle, Merlin interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. A different darkness. Ancient. One that predates your modern magic. The Addams family. Dumbledore's eyebrows shot up. The Addamses? I've heard whispers, of course, but I assumed they were simply an eccentric American wizarding family. Merlin's ghost drifted closer, his form flickering. They are no ordinary wizards, Dumbledore. They practice magic untamed by wands, unbound by your modern restrictions. Blood magic. Death magic. Chaos given form through ancient rites that would make your students' hair turn white. Surely their magic is simply different, not necessarily, do not be naive. Thunder cracked outside as Merlin's form pulsed brighter. I watched them in the ancient days. Their ancestors rejected the order I sought to bring to magic. They commune with forces better left undisturbed and delight in darkness. The ghost swept around the office, sending papers flying. They plan to return to their ancestral property near Hogwarts. You must prevent this at all costs. Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. What exactly do you fear they might do? Their very presence corrupts. Their magic resonates with the deepest, oldest enchantments of this land. Should they establish themselves here, they will awaken things that have slept since before Hogwarts was built. Merlin's ghost stopped directly in front of Dumbledore. And your students will be first to feel the effects. The Addams children especially, they experiment with forces beyond their understanding. Dumbledore removed his half-moon spectacles, polishing them slowly. This is most troubling. Merlin himself appearing with such warnings. I cannot take this lightly. The ministry must act quickly. They arrive within the fortnight. The ghost began to fade. Protect Britain, Dumbledore. Some magics are best left in the shadows of history. With a final cold gust, Merlin's ghost dissipated, leaving Dumbledore alone in his suddenly quiet office. The headmaster sat heavily in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Fawkes, he said to his phoenix, I believe we need to pay Minister Fudge an urgent visit. The phoenix trilled softly as Dumbledore rose, grabbed a handful of Floo powder, and stepped toward the fireplace. Absolutely not. Cornelius Fudge's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. Ban an entire family from entering Britain? Based on the word of a ghost. Do you have any idea of the diplomatic incident this would cause with Makusa? Dumbledore remained calm, seated across from the minister in his office. Not just any ghost, minister. Merlin himself. So you say, Fudge muttered, adjusting his lime-green bowler hat nervously. Even so, we can't simply, minister, Dumbledore interrupted gently, I understand your hesitation. But consider the source of the warning. If Merlin himself felt compelled to return from beyond the veil to deliver this message, shouldn't we at least investigate? Dolores Umbridge, sitting primly beside Fudge, cleared her throat with a simpering hem-hem. "If I may, Minister," she said in her girlish voice, "I've taken the liberty of pulling what information we have on the Addams family." She slid a thin folder across the desk. "They've been flagged by the Department for Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures on multiple occasions." Fudge flipped open the folder, his eyes widening. "They keep a pet dragon in their home. An sentient hand that roams freely," Umbridge added. "Plus numerous violations of the International Statute of Secrecy. They seem to flaunt their oddities, even among muggles." "The accounts from our international colleagues are equally concerning," Dumbledore said. "They practice wandless magic of an unpredictable nature. Magic tied to blood, death, and chaos." Fudge wiped sweat from his brow. The Daily Prophet would have a field day if such a family caused any incidents on British soil. Especially so soon after the Quidditch World Cup fiasco. He looked up at Dumbledore. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A temporary restriction," Dumbledore said. "Until we can properly assess the risk they pose. I'm not suggesting anything permanent, merely a precaution." "We could frame it as a matter of magical security," Umbridge suggested, her smile not reaching her eyes. "The Magical Border Authority already has provisions for denying entry to those practicing certain banned forms of magic." Fudge drummed his fingers on the desk. "And if they protest? We invite them to submit to a full evaluation of their magical practices," Dumbledore said smoothly. "If they have nothing to hide, they should have no objections." The minister nodded slowly. "Very well. Draft the order, Dolores. But I want this handled quietly. No press statements unless absolutely necessary." As Umbridge scurried away to prepare the paperwork, Fudge looked at Dumbledore with tired eyes. "I hope you're right about this, Albus. The last thing we need is another crisis." Dumbledore nodded gravely. "So do I, Cornelius. So do I." Morticia Addams stood in the moonlight streaming through the window of their New York mansion, her pale skin luminous against her tight black dress. She snipped the heads off a bouquet of roses, letting the blooms fall to the floor while arranging the thorny stems in a vase. "Isn't it thrilling, Gomez?" she said, her voice sultry. "Returning to the old country after all these centuries." Gomez Addams, dapper in his pinstriped suit, bounded across the room, taking his wife's hand and kissing his way up her arm. "Magnificent, cara mia. The ancestral Addams estate, reclaimed at last. Just think, the dungeons, the gargoyles, the family crypt with all those delightful relatives we've never met. Dead relatives are the best kind," Grandmama cackled from where she stirred a bubbling cauldron in the corner. "They never ask to borrow money." Wednesday Addams, 13 years old and dressed in her signature black dress with white collar, looked up from the book she was reading, Most Patenty Poisons of Britain. "Father, will there be other children to play with?" "Of course, Wednesday," Gomez said, pulling out a yellowed parchment map. "There's a whole school of magic nearby. Hogwarts, they call it." Pugsley, Wednesday's pudgy brother, looked up from the small explosive he was assembling. "Do they teach how to properly garrote someone there?" "Probably not, darling," Morticia said, stroking his head. "British wizarding education is so conventional. All wands and robes and rules. No explosions." Pugsley looked horrified. "No guillotines?" Wednesday asked, equally dismayed. "Children, children," Gomez laughed. "That's why we're moving there. To bring some Addams spirit to those stuffy British wizards." Uncle Fester shuffled into the room, his bald head gleaming. "I've been studying up on British weather," he announced proudly. "Constant rain. Perpetual gloom. Fog thick enough to hide a body." He clasped his hands in delight. "It's paradise." Lurch, their towering butler, groaned from the doorway, holding up a letter that had just arrived by owl. "What's that, Lurch?" Gomez asked. "News from Britain." Lurch handed the letter to Gomez with another groan. Gomez muttered as he read. How curious. It seems the British Ministry of Magic has denied our relocation request. He showed the letter to Morticia. They cite magical security concerns and incompatible practices as the reason. How delightful, Morticia purred. They're afraid of us. They should be, Wednesday said, her expression unchanged but a gleam entering her dark eyes. Gomez laughed, slapping his knee. This makes it much more interesting. A challenge. Thing, the disembodied hand, scuttled across the table and tapped Gomez on the shoulder, then pointed at the letter. You're right, Thing, Gomez nodded. They can't keep us from our ancestral home. The Addams bloodline has rights to that land that predate their ministry by centuries. Grandmama shuffled over, peering at the letter through her spectacles. Sounds like we need the old way, she cackled. Blood calls to blood, bone to bone, dust to dust. The ritual of return, Morticia said, her eyes lighting up. We haven't used that since great-grandfather Addams was expelled from Bavaria. Exactly. Gomez exclaimed. They can block our port keys, deny our flue access, and turn away our ships, but they cannot deny the call of Addams' blood to Addams' soil. I'll fetch the grimoire, Wednesday said, already heading for the library. I'll get the sacred chalice, Pugsley added. I'll donate the Eye of Newt. Uncle Fester called out cheerfully. And I, Morticia said with a slow smile, will pack our things. It seems we'll be taking a more unconventional route to our new home. In the Department of Magical Transportation, Junior Clerk Percy Weasley was having a very bad day. He'd been tasked with implementing the new restrictions on the Addams family, a job nobody else wanted. Denied their international port key request, he muttered to himself, checking off a box on his parchment. Blocked flue network access from all American greats to any British connection. Another check. Alerted the Muggle border authorities to watch for their names on passenger manifestos. Check. Weasley, barked Bartemius Crouch, striding into the office. Have you completed the Addams restrictions? Percy jumped to his feet. Yes, Mr. Crouch, sir. Every magical means of transportation has been closed to them. They cannot legally enter Britain by any standard method. Crouch nodded curtly. Good. The minister wants hourly updates on this situation. The magical border detection charms have been reinforced around the entire coastline as well. Sir, Percy said hesitantly, if I may ask, what exactly has this family done to warrant such measures? Crouch's expression darkened. That's classified, Weasley. But understand this, they practice magic the likes of which haven't been seen in Britain for centuries. Dumbledore himself has vouched for the danger they pose. I see, sir, Percy said, though he didn't really. It seemed extreme to ban an entire family based on rumors. But if Dumbledore supported it. After Crouch left, Percy returned to his desk, frowning at the paperwork. Something about this didn't feel right, but who was he to question Bartemius Crouch and Albus Dumbledore? 3 days later, Arthur Weasley sat at his kitchen table in the Burrow, reading the Daily Prophet with increasing concern. Molly, he called to his wife, have you seen this? Molly Weasley came over, wiping her hands on her apron. What is it, dear? Arthur pointed to a small article tucked away on page 7, Ministry denies entry to foreign magical family in an unprecedented move. The Ministry of Magic has issued a specific entry ban against the Addams family of America, citing concerns related to incompatible magical practices. The ban, approved by Minister Fudge on the recommendation of Hogwarts headmaster Albus Dumbledore, has raised eyebrows in international magical relations circles. MACUSA representatives have declined to comment, stating only that, the Addams family operates independently from mainstream American wizarding society. Percy mentioned something about this, Arthur said, frowning. Said he'd been running himself ragged implementing special restrictions. But he wouldn't tell me why, said it was classified. The Addams family? Molly's forehead wrinkled. I've heard stories, of course, but banning an entire family seems rather extreme. That's what I thought, Arthur agreed. I asked Amos Diggory about it yesterday, and he heard it came straight from Dumbledore. Something about a warning from Merlin himself. Molly's eyes widened. Merlin? But how? His ghost, apparently, Arthur shrugged. Appeared to Dumbledore with some dire warning about this family's magic being dangerous. Fred and George, who had been eavesdropping from the stairs, could contain themselves no longer and burst into the kitchen. Did someone say dangerous magic? Fred asked eagerly. And a family that's been banned from Britain? George added. Boys! Molly scolded. This isn't something to get excited about. But Mum, Fred protested, if Dumbledore's worried, it must be seriously wicked magic, George finished. Arthur sighed. That's exactly the kind of attitude that concerns me. We know nothing about these people except rumors, and suddenly they're being treated like they're worse than Death Eaters. Your father's right, Molly said firmly. Judgment without knowledge is just prejudice. I'm surprised at Dumbledore, honestly. I might ask Bill about them, Arthur mused. Working at Gringotts, he deals with international wizarding families all the time. He might know something about the Addamses that isn't just rumors. Good idea, Molly nodded. Now, Fred, George, I don't want to hear about you spreading tales about this family at school when term starts, understand? The twins looked wounded. Us? Spread rumors? Never. But the identical gleams in their eyes suggested the Addams family would be a hot topic at Hogwarts very soon. In the hills of Scotland, far from prying eyes, the Addams family stood in a circle around a glowing pit dug into the earth. They'd traveled to Scotland by Muggle means, a proposition Gomez had found thrillingly novel, first-class tickets on a death machine that hurls through the sky. Marvelous. And then made their way to a remote location for the ritual. Are we ready, my dear family? Gomez asked, his eyes wild with excitement in the firelight. The moon is perfect, Morticia confirmed, looking up at the blood-red lunar eclipse. A hunter's moon in eclipse happens only once every 173 years. Grandmama cackled, stirring a bubbling cauldron with a femur bone. I've added the grave dirt from our ancestors, the blood of each family member, and a piece of the foundation stone from our destination. Wednesday and Pugsley stood solemnly in matching black robes, holding ancient-looking daggers. Lurch groaned musically in the background, providing a bass note that seemed to make the very earth vibrate. Uncle Fester had somehow managed to make his entire head glow with an eerie blue light, illuminating the ritual space. Thing, Gomez called, the grimoire. The disembodied hand scuttled forward, carrying a massive book bound in what appeared to be human skin. It flipped open to a page marked with a blackened ribbon. Blood calls to blood, Grandmama began chanting, her voice suddenly deeper and more powerful than her frail form suggested. Bone calls to bone. The Addams line has walked this earth since before time was measured, and no mortal barrier may prevent our return. Each family member pricked their finger with their ceremonial dagger, letting drops of blood fall into the pit. We call upon the ancient powers that bound our family to the earth, Morticia intoned. Transport us to where our blood has soaked the ground, where our ancestors lie in restless slumber. By claw and fang, by night and death, by moon and shadow, Wednesday and Pugsley chanted in unison, their young voices carrying surprising power. We are Addams. Gomez shouted to the night sky. And we return to claim what is ours. The fire in the pit turned from orange to blue to a deep, pulsing purple. The ground beneath them began to shake. Is it working? Uncle Fester asked eagerly. As if in answer, the pit expanded suddenly, swallowing them all in a flash of darkness. Their surprised shouts echoed briefly before silence fell over the Scottish hillside. Miles away, deep within the Ministry of Magic, alarms began to wail. Dumbledore was in the middle of a staff meeting when the Silver Phoenix Patronus burst through the wall, speaking with Arthur Weasley's voice, Albus, emergency at the Ministry. The Addams family has somehow entered Britain. Magical detection charms went haywire 10 minutes ago. Fudge is in a panic. He's calling an emergency session of the Wizengamot. The staff room erupted in concerned murmurs as Dumbledore rose to his feet. I must go, he said calmly. Minerva, please continue in my absence. Albus, McGonagall said sharply, what's this about? Who are these Addams people, and why is their presence causing such alarm? Dumbledore hesitated. I received a warning, from a most reliable source, that this family practices ancient magic that could destabilize the very foundations of Hogwarts. What kind of magic could possibly threaten Hogwarts? Flitwick squeaked in alarm. The kind we've worked for centuries to regulate and control, Dumbledore said gravely. Wild magic. Blood magic. Magic that knows no bounds or restrictions. Snape's dark eyes narrowed. And you're certain this family intends harm? Their intentions are irrelevant if their very presence causes magical instability, Dumbledore replied. Now, I must go. The Ministry will need guidance on how to proceed. As Dumbledore swept from the room, the remaining professors exchanged troubled glances. Blood magic, Sprout whispered. That hasn't been practiced in Britain since, before wands became standard, McGonagall finished. Before Hogwarts itself. Perhaps, Snape said slowly, we should prepare the school's defenses. Just in case. The emergency Wizengamot session was chaos. Fudge stood at the podium, trying unsuccessfully to call for order as purple-robed wizards and witches shouted questions and demands. Silence. Dumbledore's magically amplified voice finally cut through the din. The chamber fell quiet immediately. Thank you, Albus, Fudge said, mopping his brow. As I was saying, despite our best efforts, the Addams family has somehow entered Britain. Our magical detection grid registered an enormous surge of unknown magic in Scotland approximately 3 hours ago. By the time our aurors arrived at the scene, they found only the remnants of some sort of ritual. What kind of ritual? Demanded Tiberius Ogden. Our experts are still analyzing it, Fudge admitted. But they've never seen anything like it. The entire area was changed. The grass turned black. The soil itself seemed to have been transformed into something else. And where are they now? Amelia Bones asked sharply. We don't know, Fudge confessed. The magical trace simply vanishes. It's as if they appeared and then disappeared again. Or your detection spells simply can't track their form of magic, Dumbledore suggested, standing to address the Wizengamot. My friends, I warned Minister Fudge that conventional methods might not be effective against the Addams family. Their magic predates our modern systems. What exactly do we know about this family? Bones pressed. Dumbledore gestured, and an image appeared in the center of the chamber, a ghoulish group portrait of the Addamses. Gomez and Morticia Addams, the parents, Dumbledore said, pointing to the mustachioed man and the vampiric woman. Their children, Wednesday and Pugsley. The bald man is Gomez's brother, Fester. The elderly woman is known only as Grandmama. The tall figure is their butler, Lurch. And there's also a sentient hand called Thing, which moves independently. Murmurs of disgust and alarm rippled through the chamber. A sentient hand, someone exclaimed. That's necromancy. Not necessarily, Dumbledore corrected. According to my source, the Addams family practices a form of magic that blurs the line between life and death, between animation and consciousness. Your source being? Bones asked skeptically. Dumbledore took a deep breath. Merlin. His spirit appeared to me with a specific warning about this family. The chamber erupted again, even louder than before. Fudge pounded his gavel frantically. Order! Order! When the noise subsided, Bones spoke again, her monocle flashing in the torchlight. Albus, with all due respect, ghosts can be unreliable. Their perceptions are often frozen at the time of their death. Merlin's ghost has never before been documented, Dumbledore countered. His appearance alone signifies the gravity of this situation. What exactly does this family want? Asked Elphia's Doge, Dumbledore's old friend. Why come to Britain now? They claim to have ancestral property here, Fudge explained. Some old estate that supposedly predates ministry records. Which would make it at least 300 years old, Bones mused. Much older, Dumbledore said quietly. According to Merlin, the Addams family was ancient even in his time. Their estate likely dates back to the days before the founders. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. What do you propose, Albus? Fudge finally asked, looking relieved to defer to the greater wizard. We must locate them quickly, Dumbledore said. I suggest a specialized task force, Aurors trained in ancient magic detection, working with unspeakables who understand pre-wand magical practices. And when we find them? Bones asked. We offer them a choice, Dumbledore said. Submit to magical binding restrictions that would prevent their more problematic practices while in Britain, or face immediate deportation. And if they refuse both options? Ogden pressed. Dumbledore's face hardened slightly. Then we would have no choice but to treat them as we would any other threat to magical Britain's security. The Wizengamot voted overwhelmingly to approve Dumbledore's proposal. As the session adjourned, Arthur Weasley approached Dumbledore in the corridor outside. Albus, he said quietly, I can't help feeling we're overreacting. Everything I've heard about the Addams family suggests they're odd, certainly, but not evil. Dumbledore placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder. I understand your concerns, Arthur. But Merlin himself felt compelled to warn me. What would you have me do? Ignore such a warning? Arthur frowned. No, but, couldn't we at least try talking to them first? Before treating them like criminals? If we can find them, that will be the first approach, Dumbledore assured him. I have no desire for conflict. As Arthur walked away, still looking troubled, Dumbledore's expression grew pensive. For just a moment, doubt flickered across his face. Deep in the Scottish Highlands, in a valley shrouded by mist, an ancient manor house stood where nothing had been the day before. Its Gothic spires reached toward the sky like gnarled fingers, and gargoyles perched along its roofline, occasionally shifting position when no one was looking. The grounds were overgrown with plants that seemed to move of their own accord, thorny vines that twisted toward passers-by, mushrooms that glowed with an eerie phosphorescence, and flowers that seemed to whisper as their black petals opened and closed. Inside, the Addams family was making themselves at home. Magnificent! Gomez exclaimed, spinning around the dusty great hall. Look at those bloodstains on the ceiling. The genuine Iron Maidens. The dungeon doors that still have scratch marks from the inside. It's perfect. Morticia glided across the room, running her pale fingers along a cobweb-covered suit of armor. It feels like we never left, she said dreamily. I can sense our ancestors all around us. They're probably in the walls, Wednesday said matter-of-factly, tapping on the ancient stones. Old houses like this often had people bricked up inside them. Can we open some up and check? Pugsley asked hopefully, already reaching for a small explosive in his pocket. After dinner, dear, Morticia said. First, we should properly greet the house. It's been waiting for us for so long. Grandmama had already taken over the kitchen, where cauldrons bubbled with unidentifiable stews. The local ingredients are excellent, she called out. I found deadly nightshade growing right outside the kitchen door. And the graveyard out back has soil rich with centuries of decay. Uncle Fester came bounding down the main staircase, electricity crackling from his fingertips. The lightning rods on the roof are perfect. I got struck twice already. Lurch merely groaned in approval as he effortlessly moved enormous pieces of furniture into place. Things scuttled across the floor and tugged at Gomez's pant leg. What is it, old friend? Gomez asked. Thing made a series of gestures, pointing toward one of the windows. People watching us? Gomez strode to the window and peered out into the mist. Ah. You're right. There's someone out there in the bushes. Probably ministry officials. He grinned broadly. How delightful. We should invite them in. For dinner? Wednesday asked hopefully. As dinner? Pugsley added. As guests, children, Morticia corrected gently. Remember what we discussed about British customs. They're very particular about not eating visitors. Only on Tuesdays, Gomez added with a wink. Morticia glided to the window beside her husband. They look rather uncomfortable out there in the mist. Perhaps we should invite them in for tea. Show them that we mean no harm. Splendid idea, cara mia. Gomez kissed her hand passionately. Nothing disarms suspicion like hospitality. Lurch, prepare tea in the formal parlor, the one with the slightly less dangerous furniture. Lurch groaned in acknowledgement and shuffled off. Should I put away the venomous teacups? Grandmama called from the kitchen. Perhaps use the merely poisonous ones, Morticia suggested. We don't want to overwhelm our guests on the first visit. Outside in the mist, Aurors Kingsley Shacklebolt and Nymphadora Tonks crouched in the bushes, observing the mysterious manor house. This is impossible, Tonks whispered. There was nothing here yesterday. No construction, no magic detected. Then that surge happened, and suddenly, mansion. Kingsley's deep voice rumbled quietly. Not just any mansion. Look at the architecture, it's at least 800 years old. They didn't build it, Tonks realized. They transported it. Whole. Across the Atlantic. That kind of magic. Kingsley shook his head in disbelief. I've never heard of anything like it. Should we call for backup? Tonks asked, her hair unconsciously shifting from pink to a more camouflaged brown. Before Kingsley could answer, the massive front doors of the mansion swung open with a dramatic creak. Silhouetted in the doorway stood the tall, imposing figure of Lurch, holding what appeared to be an engraved silver tray. Youth! Lurch groaned loudly, his voice carrying clearly across the grounds. I think, Kingsley said slowly, he's seen us. Lurch stepped forward, moving with surprising grace for someone so large. He approached their hiding spot directly, stopped a respectful distance away, and held out the silver tray. On it sat 2 envelopes sealed with red wax bearing a strange symbol. You! Lurch groaned again, extending the tray toward them. Tonks and Kingsley exchanged glances. Slowly, they stood from their hiding place. Hello, Tonks said awkwardly. We were just, conducting routine surveillance, Kingsley supplied smoothly. Lurch simply continued holding out the tray. Are those, for us? Tonks asked, pointing at the envelopes. Lurch nodded solemnly. Cautiously, Kingsley reached out and took both envelopes. He handed one to Tonks and kept the other. The wax seal featured an ornate A, surrounded by what appeared to be small ravens. Thank you, Kingsley said formally. Lurch bowed slightly, turned, and walked back toward the house. Should we open them? Tonks whispered. Not here, Kingsley said, pocketing his envelope. Let's report back first. As they turned to leave, a child's voice called out from the direction of the house. The poison takes 20 minutes to activate. If you hurry, you might find an antidote. They whirled around to see a young girl in a black dress standing on the front steps, her expression completely deadpan. Wednesday, came a woman's scolding voice from inside. Don't tease the government agents. The girl shrugged and went back inside, the massive doors closing behind her. Tonks and Kingsley stared at each other. She was joking, Tonks said uncertainly. Right? Kingsley glanced at his envelope with new wariness. Let's get these to the ministry. Quickly. At the Burrow, Ron Weasley sat at the kitchen table with Harry Potter and Hermione Granger, who were visiting for the last week before term started. Mr. Weasley had just returned from work looking troubled. "Dad, what's going on at the ministry?" Ron asked as his father slumped into a chair. "Percy's been acting even more pompous than usual, going on about some classified security situation." Arthur sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I suppose it'll be all over the Prophet tomorrow anyway. There's a family, the Addams family, that the ministry has been trying to keep out of Britain. They somehow got in anyway, and now everyone's in a panic." Hermione looked up from the book she'd been reading. "The Addams family? I've read about them. They're supposed to be one of the oldest wizarding families in the world. What's so bad about them?" Harry asked, confused. "Apparently," Arthur said, choosing his words carefully, "they practice a very different kind of magic. Pre-wand magic. Rituals, blood magic, that sort of thing." Ron's eyes widened. "Blood magic? That's dark stuff." "Not necessarily," Hermione countered. "Blood magic was standard practice before the widespread adoption of wands. It's only considered dark now because it's harder to regulate." "Exactly," Arthur nodded appreciatively at Hermione. "But the Ministry, and Dumbledore, surprisingly, seem convinced they pose some kind of threat." "Dumbledore thinks they're dangerous?" Harry frowned. "Then they must be, right?" Arthur looked conflicted. "Normally, I'd say yes. But this whole situation feels off. Dumbledore's acting on the word of Merlin's ghost, of all things." "Merlin's ghost?" Hermione gasped. "But there's no record of Merlin ever returning as a ghost. That would be an incredible historical event." "Precisely," Arthur said. "And yet, there's been no public announcement, no historical verification. Just a sudden panic about this family." "Where are they now?" Harry asked. "They've somehow transported their ancestral home to Scotland," Arthur explained. "An entire manor house, just appeared overnight. The ministry's got Aurors watching them, but so far they haven't done anything threatening." Fred and George burst into the kitchen, their faces alight with excitement. "Did you tell them about the Addamses?" Fred asked eagerly. "Lee Jordan's dad works for magical transportation," George added, "and he said they traveled here using some kind of ancient blood ritual." "Boys," Molly scolded, coming in behind them, "don't spread rumors." "It's not a rumor, Mom," Fred protested. "The ministry's in a complete tizzy over it. I've heard their daughter keeps venomous spiders as pets," George said with relish. "Trains them to attack people in their sleep. And their son collects explosives," Fred added. "Makes our stuff look like toy sparklers." "That's quite enough," Molly said firmly. "We know nothing about these people except ministry gossip." "Actually," Hermione said thoughtfully, "I think I have a book that mentions them." She dug through her ever-present book bag and pulled out a thick tome titled Ancient Magical Families of the World. "Of course you do," Ron muttered, but he leaned in with interest as Hermione flipped through the pages. "Here," she said triumphantly, pointing to an entry. "The Addams family, one of the oldest documented magical lineages, with roots predating the Roman Empire. Known for practicing elder magic, rituals based on celestial alignment, blood connections, and communion with natural forces." "See?" Fred said. "Ancient dark magic." "It doesn't say dark," Hermione corrected, scanning the page. "Just different. It says they were among the families who resisted the standardization of magical education, preferring to pass down their traditions through family lines. Which means they never adapted to modern magical restrictions," Arthur said, understanding dawning. "No wonder the ministry's concerned. But are they actually dangerous?" Harry asked, the question that was on everyone's mind. Hermione continued reading. "The family is characterized by macabre interests and unusual magical abilities, but historical accounts show no pattern of aggression or dark wizard activity." She looked up. "According to this, they're eccentric but harmless." "That's what I suspected," Arthur nodded. But then, why would Merlin's ghost specifically warn Dumbledore about them? No one had an answer to that question. Back at the ministry, Kingsley and Tonks stood in Dumbledore's temporary office, watching as he examined the envelopes with various detection spells. No curses, no hexes, no tracking charms, he murmured. How unusual. Should we open them, sir? Kingsley asked. I believe they're safe, Dumbledore said, handing the envelopes back. Though I'd still exercise caution. Tonks broke the seal on hers first, pulling out a heavy parchment card written in elegant script. The Addams family cordially invites Nymphadora Tonks to tea tomorrow at 4 o'clock to discuss matters of mutual interest. Attire, whatever makes you comfortable in a house where the furniture occasionally bites. They've invited us to tea, Tonks said, surprised. And they know our names. Kingsley opened his invitation, which contained a similar message. How did they identify us? We were under concealment charms. Fascinating, Dumbledore murmured. Their magical perception clearly operates differently than ours. He stroked his beard thoughtfully. This could be an opportunity. If they're extending an invitation, perhaps they're open to negotiation. You want us to accept? Kingsley asked skeptically. I believe we should, Dumbledore nodded. But not just you two. I shall accompany you, along with someone from the Department of Mysteries who specializes in ancient magic. Is that wise, Professor? Tonks asked. If they're as dangerous as Merlin warned, all the more reason to establish dialogue, Dumbledore said. Better to understand the nature of the threat than to act blindly. And if it's a trap? Kingsley asked pragmatically. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled, but there was steel behind them. I am rather difficult to trap, Kingsley. But your caution is noted. We shall take appropriate precautions. At precisely 4 o'clock the next day, Dumbledore, Kingsley, Tonks, and an unspeakable named Croaker stood at the gates of the Addams mansion. The mist had cleared, revealing the full grandeur of the estate, and its peculiarities. The ground seemed to have transformed overnight, with strange plants that certainly weren't native to Scotland growing in abundance. Ghostly whispers emanated from a small cemetery to the east of the house. The gargoyles on the rooftop followed their progress with stone eyes that somehow blinked. Remarkable, Croaker whispered. The entire property exists in a kind of magical microclimate. It's as if they've brought a piece of somewhere else with them. Or someone else, Dumbledore said quietly. The house itself appears to have a form of consciousness. As if confirming his words, the front doors swung open as they approached, with no one visibly operating them. Lurch stood in the entrance hall, dressed in formal butler attire. You, he groaned, bowing slightly and gesturing for them to enter. The entrance hall was a marvel of Gothic architecture, with soaring ceilings, ancient tapestries depicting what appeared to be ritual sacrifices, and a grand staircase that seemed to shift slightly when viewed from different angles. Mounted on the walls were various weapons and what appeared to be torture devices, all gleaming as if recently polished. Welcome to our humble home. Gomez Addams bounded into the hall, arms spread wide in greeting. Albus Dumbledore himself. What an honor. He seized Dumbledore's hand and pumped it enthusiastically. Mr. Addams, Dumbledore said with dignified courtesy. Thank you for inviting us. Please, call me Gomez. We're all friends here. Gomez turned to the others. And the illustrious Auror Shacklebolt. The metamorphmagus Auror Tonks. And he peered at Croaker. An unspeakable. Marvelous. We haven't been studied by the Department of Mysteries in at least 3 centuries. Croaker shifted uncomfortably. My dear guests, came Morticia's sultry voice as she glided into the hall. How wonderful of you to accept our invitation despite your ministries, reservations about our family. There was something mesmerizing about Morticia Addams. Her pale skin seemed to glow against her tight black dress, and her movements were fluid and graceful, almost hypnotic. Cara mia! Gomez exclaimed, immediately distracted by his wife. He grabbed her hand and began kissing his way up her arm passionately. You enchant me. Morticia smiled indulgently before gently extracting her arm. Gomez, darling, our guests. Of course, of course. Gomez straightened his tie. Lurch will show you to the parlor for tea. Don't mind the chairs, they only bite strangers occasionally, and we've muzzled most of them. As they followed Lurch through the mansion, Tonks whispered to Kingsley, are they putting on an act? They seem so, normal. I mean, weird normal, but not evil normal. Stay alert, Kingsley murmured back. Appearances can be deceiving. The parlor was a large room dominated by an enormous fireplace where green flames danced without fuel. The furniture was antique and ornate, though some pieces did indeed appear to have been muzzled with small leather straps. A tea service was laid out on a table that stood on what looked disconcertingly like human legs. Please, sit. Gomez invited them. Careful of that chair by the window, it has a particular fondness for wizards with beards. Dumbledore chose a different seat. As they settled in, two children entered the room. The girl, Wednesday, regarded the visitors with unblinking eyes that seemed far older than her years. The boy, Pugsley, was eyeing Tonks's colorful hair with scientific curiosity. Can you make your hair look like snakes? He asked bluntly. Like Medusa? Pugsley, Morticia chided gently. Not everyone appreciates serpentine hair. I can, actually, Tonks said, surprising everyone by morphing her pink spikes into writhing, snake-like tendrils. Pugsley's eyes lit up. Wicked. Even Wednesday's expression shifted slightly, the ghost of a smile. Grandmama shuffled in with a fresh pot of tea, followed by Uncle Fester, whose head was smoking slightly. Just had a little accident with the lightning collection, Fester explained cheerfully. Who wants to see my new conductor? He began to reach for his waistband. Perhaps later, brother, Gomez interceded smoothly. Tea first, electrical demonstrations after. As Grandmama poured the tea, a disturbing shade of purple that smelled faintly of grave moss, Dumbledore finally spoke. I must admit, Mr. and Mrs. Addams, I'm curious why you were so determined to come to Britain despite the ministry's restrictions. It's quite simple, Headmaster, Morticia said, her voice like dark velvet. This is our ancestral home. Addamses lived on this land long before Britain had a ministry of magic, before Hogwarts stood on the hill yonder. Your family predates Hogwarts? Croaker asked, speaking for the first time, professional curiosity overriding caution. Oh my, yes, Gomez nodded enthusiastically. The Addams family has been practicing magic since humans first discovered they could manipulate the forces of nature and death. And that's precisely what concerns the ministry, Dumbledore said carefully. Your family practices magics that have been regulated or restricted in Britain for centuries. Regulated, Gomez repeated, his mustache twitching with amusement. Such a polite word for forbidden because people fear what they don't understand. Is that why you've brought a ghost of Merlin to warn against us? Morticia asked, her dark eyes fixed on Dumbledore. Because you fear what you don't understand. A tense silence fell over the room. Kingsley and Tonks exchanged alarmed glances. How did you know about that? Dumbledore asked, his voice perfectly calm but his eyes sharp. We have our ways of communicating with the dead, Wednesday said matter-of-factly. And Merlin has been dead for a very long time. The dead talk, Pugsley added. All the time. Most people just don't know how to listen. Grandmama cackled. And that so-called Merlin that visited you? Not the real thing, dearie. No, no, no. Something else wearing his face. Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but a flicker of doubt crossed his eyes. What do you mean? Merlin's spirit passed beyond the veil centuries ago, Morticia explained. What appeared to you may have looked like Merlin, but our ancestors confirm it was not him. Then what was it? Dumbledore asked. Gomez leaned forward, his normal joviality momentarily subdued. That, headmaster, is the real mystery. Something wants us to stay away from Britain, something that doesn't want old magic returning to these shores. He spread his hands. We came not only to reclaim our ancestral home but to discover what fears our presence so much that it would masquerade as Merlin himself. As Dumbledore absorbed this, a small thing, scuttled across the table and handed Gomez a note. Gomez read it quickly, his eyebrows shooting up. Well. It seems we have more company. Ministry officials at the gate, quite a lot of them, according to Thing. And they don't appear to be coming for tea. Outside the Addams mansion, a contingent of 20 Aurors and ministry officials stood at the gates, led by Cornelius Fudge himself and Dolores Umbridge. Are you certain this is necessary, Minister? Percy Weasley asked nervously. Dumbledore is already inside negotiating, that's precisely what concerns me, Fudge snapped. Dumbledore has been in there for over an hour with no communication. For all we know, they've already done something to him. The Ministry detection grid just registered another surge of unknown magic from this property, Umbridge added, her girlish voice at odds with her vindictive expression. We have the authority and the duty to investigate. The gates to the property suddenly swung open of their own accord. See? Umbridge said triumphantly. They're inviting us in. They know resistance is futile. The Ministry contingent cautiously made their way up the winding path to the mansion. The plants along the way seemed to turn to follow their progress, and more than one Auror swore they heard whispering coming from the bushes. As they reached the front steps, the massive doors opened. Dumbledore stood in the entrance hall, looking perfectly unharmed and rather amused. Cornelius, he greeted the minister. What an unexpected pleasure. Won't you join us for tea? The Addams family has been most hospitable. Fudge looked flummoxed. Tea. Albus, we received reports of dangerous magical activity. That would be Uncle Fester's electrical experiments, Gomez said cheerfully, appearing beside Dumbledore. Fascinating stuff. He's teaching the children how to channel lightning through their fingertips. Perfectly harmless, well, mostly harmless. Burns heal, after all. Umbridge pushed forward. Mr. Addams, your family is in Britain illegally. You've violated multiple magical transportation laws, performed unauthorized rituals on British soil, and transported an entire building across international borders without permits. Gomez beamed at her. Quite an accomplishment, isn't it? Would you like to see how we did it? Grandmama still has the cauldron set up. This is not a joke, Mr. Addams, Umbridge said coldly. The Ministry has authorized me to present you with this. She held out an official-looking document. It's an order for your immediate deportation, or alternatively, submission to magical binding restrictions during your stay in Britain. I see, Gomez said, taking the document and examining it with apparent interest. Very official. Lovely wax seal. He handed it to Morticia, who had glided up beside him. Such elegant threats, Morticia murmured, scanning the document. Imprisonment in Azkaban. Magical core binding. You British certainly know how to make guests feel welcome. Those are the consequences if you refuse to comply, Umbridge clarified with a smug smile. Before we discuss compliance, Dumbledore interjected smoothly, there is a matter of some importance we were just discussing. The Addams family has raised concerns about the apparition of Merlin that appeared to me. Concerns? Fudge repeated, confused. What concerns? They believe, and have offered compelling evidence, that what appeared to me was not actually Merlin's ghost, but something else entirely. Something that wanted to prevent their return to Britain. Fudge looked between Dumbledore and the Addamses, clearly out of his depth. What does that have to do with the laws they've broken? Everything, perhaps, Dumbledore said gravely. If we have been manipulated into treating innocent people as threats based on false information. Innocent? Umbridge scoffed. They practice blood magic. They transported an entire building through unknown means. Their very presence disrupts our magical detection grid. All true, Gomez nodded cheerfully. Though I'd argue the disruption is more of a side effect than an intention. Like flatulence after grandmama's special stew. Before Umbridge could respond to this, a tremendous boom shook the mansion, sending dust raining from the ceiling. Everyone looked up in alarm. What was that? Fudge demanded. Pugsley's 4 o'clock explosion, Wednesday said calmly, appearing at the top of the grand staircase. He's very punctual. Another boom, this time accompanied by a flash of blue light visible through the windows. That's not one of ours, Gomez frowned, suddenly serious. A third explosion, closer this time, rattled the windows. Outside, screams could be heard from the ministry contingent who had remained in the grounds. We're under attack, Kingsley said, drawing his wand. But who would, Fudge began. I think, Dumbledore said quietly, we're about to meet whatever was masquerading as Merlin. The front doors, which had closed behind the ministry group, suddenly blew inward with tremendous force. In the doorway stood a figure that, at first glance, appeared to be Merlin, long beard, ancient robes, staff in hand. But as it stepped into the light of the entrance hall, its appearance flickered like a bad television signal, revealing glimpses of something else underneath, something with too many limbs and eyes that glowed an unnatural purple. You were warned, Addams family, the figure said, its voice echoing unnaturally. Britain is not for you. Well, Gomez said, straightening his tie and looking utterly delighted. Isn't this interesting? The plot thickens. Run, Morticia told the children calmly. Get Grandmama and Uncle Fester. It's time for the family to properly introduce ourselves to our mysterious new neighbor. As Wednesday and Pugsley raced upstairs, the false Merlin raised its staff, and the air around it seemed to warp and twist. This should be quite the housewarming party, Gomez grinned, drawing what appeared to be an ancient, rune-covered sword from his walking stick. Minister, Madam Umbridge, you might want to take cover. Things are about to get rather. Addams. Chapter 2, Clash of Magics. The false Merlin staff came down with a thunderous crack against the marble floor of the Addams entrance hall. A shockwave of sickly purple energy exploded outward, sending ministry officials flying backwards. Dumbledore reacted instantly, his wand slicing through the air. A shimmering dome materialized, protecting himself and those closest to him. The Addamses didn't move an inch, the energy waves simply passed through them like they were smoke. Fascinating, Gomez remarked, examining the entity with genuine curiosity. A dimensional parasite using Merlin's residual spiritual signature as camouflage. Haven't seen one of those since Great Aunt Lavinia's wedding in 1754. Ministers, Aurors, behind me, if you please. Dumbledore commanded, his usual serene demeanor replaced with battlefield focus. The impostor's form flickered violently, the grandfatherly Merlin disguise slipping to reveal glimpses of something ancient and decidedly non-human beneath. You were warned to stay away, the creature hissed, its voice oscillating between Merlin's dignified tones and something that sounded like rocks grinding together. The old magic must not return to Britain. Oh, but we're already here, Morticia said calmly, drawing a thin black wand from her sleeve, not a typical wizard's wand, but what appeared to be a polished human bone carved with symbols. Fudge squeaked in terror, scrambling backward. Seize them. Seize them all. Aurors raised their wands, caught in confusion between the monstrous entity and the bizarre family they'd come to deport. Minister, I strongly advise, Dumbledore began, but chaos had already erupted. Spells flew from ministry wands, stunners, binding hexes, disarming charms, aimed at both the false Merlin and the Addamses. The entity deflected them with contemptuous ease. The spells directed at the Addams family had, stranger results. A stupefy hit Gomez directly in the chest, and he simply grinned wider. Invigorating, he declared, doing a small pirouette. Like a strong espresso. Incarcerous ropes wrapped around Morticia, then immediately withered and crumbled to dust. How disappointing, she sighed. I do enjoy good quality restraints. The false Merlin roared in frustration, its disguise slipping further. Fools! Your pathetic modern magic cannot harm them, that is why they must be destroyed. It raised its staff again, but this time Lurch stepped forward with surprising speed for his size. The butler intercepted the staff mid-swing with his bare hand, and a sound like a gong being struck resonated through the mansion. You, rang. Lurch intoned, his cavernous voice shaking dust from the ceiling. The entity shrieked, yanking its staff back. Where Lurch had touched it, the wood smoked and blackened. Enough! Dumbledore shouted, stepping between the ministry group and the escalating confrontation. Cornelius, order your people to stand down. This is not what we believed it to be. Stand down. Fudge sputtered. There's a monster in the doorway and these people are immune to our spells. Not immune, came Wednesday's cold, clinical voice as she returned, now holding what looked like a small crossbow. Just differently affected. Your magic is like trying to drown a fish. Pugsley bounced back into the hall behind his sister, clutching a suspicious bulging sack that ticked ominously. Got the emergency kit, father. Splendid, my boy. Gomez beamed proudly. Uncle Fester slid down the banister, electricity crackling around his bald head. Who's ready for a light show? Grandmama shuffled in last, carrying a bubbling cauldron that emitted green smoke. Just need 3 minutes to brew. Keep its attention. The false Merlin seemed to realize it was now outnumbered. It took a step back toward the door. This is not over, it growled, its form destabilizing further. The old magic threatens everything. You will all see. Oh, I don't think you're leaving just yet, Gomez said cheerfully. We haven't properly introduced ourselves. Addamses, shall we? What followed was unlike anything the ministry officials had ever witnessed. The Addams family moved with perfect synchronization, yet none of them used recognizable spells or wand movements. Morticia raised her bone wand and traced a symbol in the air that seemed to burn with black flame. The mansion itself groaned in response, and the doors slammed shut behind the entity, trapping it inside. Gomez tossed his sword to Fester, who caught it and thrust it into the nearest wall socket. Electricity surged along the blade, arcing toward the false Merlin in blinding blue bolts. Wednesday fired her crossbow, but instead of an arrow, it shot what appeared to be a tiny glass vial that shattered against the entity's robes, releasing a cloud of silvery dust that clung to its form, making its disguise fluctuate wildly. Containment powder, she explained to a gaping Tonks. Great-great-grandmother's recipe. Forces spectral entities to maintain corporeal form. Pugsley had removed several spherical objects from his sack and rolled them across the floor surrounding the creature. They sprouted spidery metal legs and began emitting a low humming sound. What in Merlin's name, the real Merlin, is happening? Percy Weasley gasped. Family magic, Dumbledore replied, watching with intense interest. Magic bound by blood and intent rather than structured incantations. The false Merlin thrashed against the electric currents, its form shifting more rapidly between the wizard's appearance and something insectoid and ancient. It raised its staff, preparing to strike. Duck, Gomez suggested pleasantly to the ministry group. Those who heeded the warning were spared being showered with plaster as the entity blasted a hole in the ceiling. It attempted to escape upward, only to bounce off an invisible barrier. Antidimensional shift wards, Morticia explained, gesturing gracefully with her bone wand. Essential for any proper haunted mansion. Grandmama cackled and flung the contents of her cauldron at the creature. The potion splashed across its semi-corporeal form, sizzling and steaming. Reveal your true self, dearie, she commanded. The effect was immediate. The Merlin disguise ripped away like tissue paper, revealing a creature that defied easy description, part insect, part shadow, with too many limbs and eyes that glowed with malevolent purple light. Its body seemed partly physical, partly smoke. Oh, an obscurialis major. Gomez said with delight. I haven't seen one since my honeymoon with Tish in the catacombs of Paris. Fudge made a strangled noise of terror. Several oars backed toward the walls. Umbridge's face had gone paste-white. "Don't be rude, dear," Morticia chided her husband gently. "Introduce yourself properly." "Of course, cara mia," Gomez bowed theatrically to the monstrous entity. "Gomez Addams, at your service." "And you are?" The creature responded with a shriek that made several ministry officials cover their ears in pain. "He says his name is Zalthazor, devourer of magical essence," Wednesday translated matter-of-factly. "And he's been trapped in the space between dimensions for the last 8 centuries. "How do you know that?" Kingsley asked in astonishment. Wednesday just stared at him. "I speak Eldritch. Mother insisted we learn the dead languages." "Not dead, darling," Morticia corrected. "Just resting." The creature, Zalthazor, lunged toward Fudge, perhaps identifying him as the leader. Dumbledore stepped forward, his wand moving in complex patterns. A cage of golden light formed around the entity, temporarily containing it. "I cannot hold this for long," Dumbledore warned, strain evident in his voice. "This creature exists partially in another dimension. Just needs a proper anchor," Fester announced cheerfully. He extended his arms, the sword still crackling with electricity in one hand. "Hit me with your best shot, ugly." Uncle Fester, Gomez explained to the bewildered onlookers, has a unique relationship with electrical and dimensional energies. Side effect of being buried alive for 25 years. Happens to the best of us, Fester nodded sagely. Zalthazor shrieked again and hurled itself against Dumbledore's magical cage. The golden bars began to crack. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion elsewhere," Dumbledore suggested calmly, though sweat beaded on his brow from the effort of maintaining the containment. "Nonsense," Gomez declared. "We haven't finished welcoming our guest." He turned to Pugsley. "Son, the family special." Pugsley's face lit up with unholy glee. He twisted something on the metal spheres surrounding Zalthazor. They began spinning rapidly, the humming intensifying. "Everyone hit the floor," Wednesday advised tonelessly. "Unless you enjoy being atomized." This time, everyone, including the most stubborn ministry officials, obeyed without question. Dumbledore released his containment spell and dropped just as the devices detonated. Instead of an explosion, they created a swirling vortex of energy that surrounded Zalthazor, compressing inward. The creature fought against it, limbs and shadow tendrils thrashing, but the vortex continued to tighten. "Dimensional compression field," Gomez explained excitedly from his prone position on the floor. "Forces extradimensional entities fully into our reality where they're subject to its physical laws." With a final, ear-splitting shriek, Zalthazor was compacted into a small, writhing ball of purple energy about the size of a quaffle. It bounced once on the marble floor, then rolled to a stop at Umbridge's feet. She scrambled backward with a squeal of terror. Uncle Fester sauntered over and picked up the compressed entity. "I'll just put this somewhere safe," he said, tucking it into his coat pocket where it continued to glow and vibrate angrily. A stunned silence fell over the entrance hall. Dust and plaster drifted down from the damaged ceiling. The Addams family began casually dusting themselves off as if nothing unusual had happened. "Well," Gomez said brightly, straightening his tie, "how about that tea now? Lurch, we'll need a fresh pot, and perhaps something stronger for our ministry friends. They look a bit peaked." News of the incident at the Addams mansion spread through the wizarding world like fiendfire. The Daily Prophet's evening edition featured a dramatic headline: "Cosmic Horror Attacks Ministry Officials, Mysterious American Family Saves Minister Fudge from Interdimensional Entity Dumbledore, a Complete Misunderstanding." At the Burrow, Arthur Weasley read the article aloud to his family and guests over dinner, his voice growing more incredulous with each paragraph. Witnesses report that the Addams family displayed magical abilities unlike anything seen in Britain for centuries, containing and neutralizing the threat while ministry aura spells proved ineffective. Arthur looked up, shaking his head in disbelief. And it goes on to say Minister Fudge has temporarily suspended the deportation order pending a full investigation. So they're not evil after all? Ron asked through a mouthful of mashed potatoes. Ronald, chew with your mouth closed, Molly scolded automatically. It certainly doesn't sound like it, Arthur replied. Though according to this, their magic is, well, rather unusual. I knew it. Hermione exclaimed, her eyes bright with excitement. Their magic must be pre-standardization. Before Hogwarts, before the Ministry, wizards used all sorts of different magical systems based on their family traditions and geographical location. Exactly, Arthur nodded. Percy sent me an owl, said it was the strangest thing he'd ever seen. They weren't using wands, at least not proper wands, and there weren't any recognizable spells or incantations. Blood magic, Fred and George said together in hushed, excited voices. Not necessarily, Hermione countered. Pre-modern magic took many forms. Some used ritual objects, others used their connection to specific locations or celestial events. Some practiced sympathetic magic using representations of their targets. Whatever it was, Arthur continued, it worked when our standard spells failed. Percy said Dumbledore himself couldn't properly contain this entity. Called a Zal something. Zalthazor, Harry read from the paper. It says here it was masquerading as Merlin's ghost to manipulate Dumbledore into keeping the Addams family away from Britain. He frowned. But why would it do that? It must have been afraid of their magic, Hermione reasoned. If they practice ancient forms that have been forgotten in Britain, they might have been the only ones capable of recognizing and stopping it. So what happens now? Ron asked. According to this, Harry said, still reading, Dumbledore has invited the Addams family to Hogwarts for further discussions and cultural exchange. Fred and George's eyes lit up. Cultural exchange? Fred repeated gleefully. Do you think they might teach some classes? George wondered. Absolutely not, Molly said firmly. From what I've heard, their ideas about education are unconventional, to say the least. The daughter keeps venomous spiders, Fred said dreamily. The son builds explosives, George added with equal reverence. They sound awesome, Ron said, then caught his mother's eye and quickly added, I mean, dangerous. Very dangerous. Actually, Arthur said thoughtfully, Dumbledore wants me to join the delegation meeting with them tomorrow at Hogwarts. As head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office, I'm supposed to assess whether their magical practices violate any secrecy statutes. Can we come? Harry asked immediately. Arthur looked uncertain. I'm not sure that would be appropriate. Please, Dad, Ron pleaded. We're going back to Hogwarts in a week anyway. And Hermione's already done half the research on their family magic. I have been studying pre-wand magical traditions, Hermione admitted. Professor McGonagall approved an independent research project on it last term. Arthur wavered visibly. Well, I suppose I could ask Dumbledore. He did mention wanting a fresh perspective on the situation. Yes. Ron pumped his fist. This is going to be brilliant, Harry grinned. Hermione was already mentally compiling a list of questions about ancient magical practices. If, and it's a big if, Dumbledore agrees, Arthur cautioned, you'll need to behave with absolute professionalism. The relationship between the Ministry and this family is still delicate. Of course, Hermione nodded seriously. Totally professional, Ron agreed. Won't cause any trouble, Harry promised. Molly looked skeptical. Why does that not reassure me in the slightest? Early the next morning, Harry, Ron and Hermione stepped out of the Hogwarts Flu connection into the empty Great Hall. The castle felt strange during summer break, eerily quiet without the hundreds of students that normally filled its corridors. Wicked, Ron whispered, his voice echoing slightly. Never seen the place this empty. It's not entirely empty, came Professor McGonagall's voice as she strode toward them from the entrance hall. Good morning, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger. Arthur informed me you would be joining us today. Thank you for allowing us to come, Professor, Hermione said politely. Professor Dumbledore believes you three might offer a valuable perspective, McGonagall replied, though her tight expression suggested she might not entirely agree. The Addams family will be arriving shortly. They've expressed particular interest in meeting students. Where's my dad? Ron asked, looking around. Mr. Weasley is with the headmaster and several ministry representatives in the conference room. You'll join them shortly. McGonagall adjusted her spectacles. First, however, I feel it necessary to provide some context. The events reported in the Daily Prophet, while broadly accurate, significantly understated the unusual nature of our guests. You mean they're magic? Hermione asked eagerly. They're everything, Miss Granger, McGonagall said dryly. Their appearance, their behavior, their magical practices, all defy conventional wizarding norms. Are they dangerous? Harry asked. McGonagall considered this. Not intentionally, I believe. However, their casual relationship with things most wizards consider hazardous is concerning. I must ask you to maintain a certain degree of caution. Like what kind of hazardous things? Ron asked, intrigued. Their son apparently carries explosives in his pockets as a matter of course, McGonagall said. Their daughter conducts experiments with poisons and venoms. The uncle generates electrical discharges spontaneously. And they keep a disembodied hand as a family pet. Ron's eyes widened. Wicked. McGonagall's lips thinned disapprovingly. That is precisely the attitude I'm cautioning against, Mr. Weasley. Now, follow me. They should be arriving at the gates momentarily. They followed McGonagall through the entrance hall and out onto the grounds. A small welcoming committee had already gathered near the gates, Dumbledore, resplendent in midnight blue robes spangled with stars, Arthur Weasley, looking both nervous and excited, Percy, clutching a clipboard and trying to appear important, and several other ministry officials Harry didn't recognize. Ah, excellent. Dumbledore beamed as they approached. Harry, Ron, Hermione, I'm delighted you could join us for this historic occasion. Historic, Headmaster? Hermione asked. Indeed, Miss Granger. To my knowledge, no practitioners of pre-standardized magic have set foot in Hogwarts since the time of the founders themselves. The magical theories we may exchange today could revolutionize our understanding of. He broke off as a rumbling sound reached their ears. All heads turned toward the gates. Is that thunder? Percy asked, looking up at the clear blue sky. No, Arthur said slowly. It sounds like an engine. The rumbling grew louder, accompanied now by a rhythmic clacking noise. And then, around the bend in the road leading to Hogsmeade, it appeared. A hearse. An enormous, antique black hearse with silver filigree decorating its sides, pulled by a team of skeletal horses, not thestrals, but actual animated skeletons, their bone hooves clacking against the stone road. Good Lord, McGonagall murmured, her hand going to her throat. The vehicle pulled up to the gates and screeched to a halt. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door swung open, and Lurch unfolded his enormous frame from inside. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door with a formal bow. Gomez Addams bounded out, dressed in a pinstriped suit that wouldn't have looked out of place in the 1930s. He doffed his hat to the assembled crowd. Hogwarts, he exclaimed, spreading his arms wide. Magnificent. Every bit as grand as the ancestral stories described. Morticia emerged next, elegant in a floor-length black gown that seemed to move like living shadows around her. It positively reeks of ancient magic, she said appreciatively, inhaling deeply. Like a fine aged perfume. The back doors of the hearse opened, and Wednesday and Pugsley stepped out, followed by Uncle Fester and Grandmama. Things scuttled down from the driver's area and perched on Gomez's shoulder. Welcome to Hogwarts, Dumbledore said warmly, approaching the gates. With a wave of his wand, they swung open. I trust your journey was pleasant. Delightful. Gomez enthused. Though several muggles seemed distressed by our mode of transportation. Something about dead horses being a traffic violation. He shrugged cheerfully. Lurch took care of it. The butler groaned what might have been agreement. Mr. Addams, Percy stepped forward officiously, I must remind you that enchanting muggle vehicles and displaying animated skeletal remains in public both constitute violations of, Percy, Arthur interrupted gently, perhaps we could discuss regulatory concerns after we've properly welcomed our guests. Percy subsided, though he made a show of noting something on his clipboard. Please, come in, Dumbledore invited, gesturing toward the castle. We've prepared refreshments in the Great Hall. As the unusual procession made its way across the grounds, Harry, Ron, and Hermione hung back slightly, observing their visitors with fascination. They look so normal, Ron whispered. I mean, weird normal, but I was expecting something more monstrous. They're not monsters, Ron, Hermione hissed. They're just wizards with different traditions. The daughter keeps looking at me, Harry murmured uneasily. Wednesday Addams had indeed dropped back from her family and was regarding Harry with unblinking intensity. You're Harry Potter, she said flatly. It wasn't a question. Yes, Harry replied awkwardly. You survived a killing curse as an infant. Again, not a question. That's right. Wednesday nodded thoughtfully. Impressive. In my family, we don't consider death something to be avoided, merely an interesting transition. She cocked her head. Would you be willing to donate blood samples? I'm conducting a study on magical survivability. Harry looked desperately at his friends. Wednesday. Morticia called from ahead. Don't pester our hosts for bodily fluids until after lunch. It's impolite. Yes, Mother, Wednesday replied, but continued staring at Harry with scientific interest. Pugsley sidled up to Ron, eyeing his wand curiously. Do you really need that stick to do magic? Ron bristled. It's not a stick, it's a wand. And yeah, that's how proper wizards do magic. Pugsley looked genuinely confused. That seems really limiting. What if someone takes it away? Before Ron could answer, Uncle Fester bounded over, electricity crackling around his bald head. Say, are you kids interested in explosions? I've been working on a new spell that combines nitroglycerin with salamander blood. Uncle Fester, Wednesday said tonelessly, they use wands here. They probably don't appreciate the finer points of alchemical combustion. Wands? Fester looked crestfallen. You mean you can't do this? He snapped his fingers, and a ball of blue electricity formed above his palm. Hermione gasped. That's wandless magic. But that's incredibly advanced, most wizards can't, advanced. Fester looked puzzled. We teach the babies to do this before they can walk. Ahead of them, they could hear Gomez chatting animatedly with Dumbledore. And so I said to the Tibetan monk, that's not a yeti, that's my cousin Bobo. Gomez laughed uproariously at his own joke. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with genuine amusement. Fascinating. I've long suspected the Yeti legends had a wizarding connection. Oh, absolutely, Gomez nodded enthusiastically. The Addams branch in the Himalayas has been intermarrying with them for centuries. Makes for wonderfully hairy reunions. By the time they reached the Great Hall, Harry felt slightly dizzy from the sheer oddness of the Addamses. They didn't seem malevolent, just operating on a completely different set of assumptions about what was normal. The Great Hall had been rearranged with a long table set for lunch. As they took their seats, Dumbledore addressed the gathering. Today marks a truly remarkable occasion, a bridge between different magical traditions that have been separated for far too long. The incident with Zalfazor has shown us that there is much we can learn from each other. Here, Gomez agreed, raising a goblet that had appeared before him. I propose we begin with an open exchange, Dumbledore continued. The Addams family has graciously agreed to demonstrate some of their magical practices, and in return, we shall showcase the education we provide at Hogwarts. We're particularly interested in your defensive magic, Morticia added, delicately sipping from her goblet. The protection spells around this castle are impressive, if conventional. One of the ministry officials, a woman with a monocle whom Harry recognized as Amelia Bones, leaned forward. Mrs. Addams, I wonder if you might clarify something for us. Reports indicate your family was immune to standard stunning and binding spells during the confrontation at your estate. How is that possible? Not immune, Morticia corrected gently. Simply differently affected. Your spells are designed for standardized magical cores. Wizards train from childhood to channel magic through wands. Our family's magic flows differently. Blood magic, Percy muttered, just loudly enough to be heard. An oversimplification, Grandmama cackled from further down the table. Blood is just one conduit. We use bone, hair, breath, intention, celestial alignment, elemental affinity, whatever works for the task at hand. That sounds dangerously unregulated, Percy said disapprovingly. Regulation is a modern concept, Wednesday pointed out. Magic itself doesn't recognize your ministry's classification system. But without proper control, Percy began. Control isn't the same as suppression, young man, Gomez interrupted cheerfully. We have perfect control over our magic. We simply define the parameters differently. Hermione, who had been practically vibrating with the effort of containing her questions, finally spoke up. Is it true your family practiced magic before wands became standard? How do you focus your magical intent without a channeling device? Excellent question. Gomez beamed at her. Tish, she's speaking our language. The body itself is the primary channeling device, Morticia explained. Though we do use tools, ceremonial daggers, specific bones, astronomically significant metals. But the core principle is that magic lives within the witch or wizard, not within their instruments. That's actually similar to what wand makers say, Harry pointed out. The wand chooses the wizard because it resonates with their innate magic. Precisely. Gomez pointed at Harry approvingly. The wand system simply externalized and standardized what was originally an internal process. Efficient for teaching large groups, certainly, but at the cost of certain nuances. Like immunity to stunning spells? Ron asked skeptically. Like the ability to commune directly with the dead, Wednesday corrected flatly. Or to bind one's life force to specific locations, or to create family-specific enchantments that last for centuries. A thoughtful silence fell over the table. Perhaps a demonstration would be enlightening, Dumbledore suggested. Something to illustrate the practical differences between our magical approaches. Capital idea. Gomez leapt to his feet. Pugsley, my boy, the presentation kit. Pugsley grinned and reached into his seemingly bottomless pocket, extracting what looked like a shrunken trunk. He set it on the floor and stood back. Morticia rose gracefully and approached the trunk. She made a series of fluid gestures with her hands, speaking words in a language none of the Hogwarts contingent recognized. The trunk shuddered, then expanded, not in the way a magically shrunken object normally would, but by seemingly growing additional sections that unfolded like a complex puzzle box. When it finished, what stood before them was an ornate cabinet of dark wood covered in carved runes and symbols. Morticia opened its doors to reveal an array of items, bones, crystals, small bottles of mysterious substances, dried herbs, and various tools. The basics of Addams family magic, she explained. Each demonstration requires different materials. We'll start with something simple, Gomez declared. Household animation. He selected what appeared to be a small animal skull from the cabinet and placed it on the table. Gomez made a series of gestures over it while Morticia and Wednesday began a haunting, melodic chant. Grandmama sprinkled some kind of glittering powder around the skull. The effect was immediate. The skull's eye sockets began to glow with a soft blue light, and it rose a few inches off the table. Good afternoon, the skull said politely in a small, hollow voice. How may I assist the family today? Percy nearly fell off his chair. Professor McGonagall's eyebrows had disappeared into her hairline. That's not like a standard animation charm, Hermione whispered, awestruck. It's showing actual sentience. A simple household helper, Gomez explained proudly. Every Addams residence has dozens of them, animated objects that maintain the property, deliver messages, guard specific areas. But that's, Percy sputtered. That's creating life. Not life, Wednesday corrected. Borrowed consciousness. We're simply allowing ambient magical energy to use the skull as a focus point and interface. Next, Grandmama announced, pushing Gomez aside, something practical. She selected several dried herbs and what looked disturbingly like a mummified frog from the cabinet. Crushing these together in her gnarled hands, she began a sing-song incantation while circling the table. The temperature in the great hall dropped noticeably. Frost formed on the goblets. And then, to everyone's amazement, ghostly figures began to materialize around them, transparent, glowing shapes of wizards and witches in ancient attire. The previous heads of Hogwarts, Dumbledore realized, recognizing some from their portraits in his office. Just a simple communal séance, Grandmama explained casually. Calling those with strong ties to this location who might want a word. One ghost, a severe-looking witch in medieval robes, drifted toward Dumbledore. Headmaster, she said, her voice sounding as if it came from the bottom of a well, I've been trying to communicate with you through my portrait for decades about the hidden chamber beneath the astronomy tower. Dumbledore looked genuinely taken aback. I wasn't aware your portrait was trying to communicate anything specific, Headmistress Wilkins. Because portrait magic is a pale imitation of true necromantic communication, Wednesday explained matter-of-factly. It captures an impression, not the actual spiritual essence. The ministry officials looked deeply uncomfortable with the word necromantic, but Dumbledore seemed fascinated. This is remarkable, he said, watching as more spirits materialized. True communion with the departed, without the need for the ghost to have chosen to remain earthbound. We can end the demonstration if it's disturbing to anyone, Morticia offered, noting the pale faces around the table. I think that might be wise, Arthur said tactfully. It's rather intense for a first introduction. Grandmama looked disappointed but waved her hand dismissively. The spirits faded away, leaving the great hall significantly warmer. Well, that was just a taste, Gomez said cheerfully. We haven't even gotten to the really interesting stuff, family defensive magic, interdimensional transference, blood-bound enchantments. Perhaps we should proceed to the tour of Hogwarts, Dumbledore interjected smoothly. I believe seeing our educational approaches might provide valuable context for further discussions. As they rose from the table, Uncle Fester approached Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Say, you kids want to see something really neat? I've got Zalthazor in my pocket. He began reaching into his coat. Uncle Fester, Morticia called. We agreed the interdimensional entity would remain in its containment vessel for the duration of our visit. Fester looked crestfallen. He gets lonely. Perhaps later, Morticia said soothingly, then addressed the trio. My apologies. Fester grows attached to his projects. You have an interdimensional monster, in your pocket? Ron asked incredulously. Contained, of course, Morticia assured him. Pugsley's compression field is quite secure. Usually, Wednesday added tonelessly. As they followed the adults out of the great hall, Hermione couldn't contain herself any longer. She hurried to walk beside Morticia. Mrs. Addams, I've been researching pre-wand magical traditions, but there's so little reliable information available. Would it be possible to ask questions? Of course, dear, Morticia smiled warmly. It's refreshing to meet a young witch with interest in the old ways. Your magic seems to have a strong connection to death, Hermione observed carefully. Is that common in pre-standardized traditions? Death is simply another state of existence, Morticia explained. Modern wizardry has created an artificial separation between the living and the dead. Our family has always recognized the continuum. Is that why standard spells affect you differently? Partly, Morticia nodded. Your stunning spells, for instance, target a specific configuration of magical energy centered around the standardized magical core. Our magic flows through our entire being, blood, bone, sinew, spirit. There's no central point to disrupt. Hermione's eyes widened. That's why you're not vulnerable to the same spells. Your magical signature is completely different. Precisely. Just as your wand-based magic would seem strange and limited to our ancestors. Meanwhile, Wednesday had fallen into step beside Harry again. Your scar contains a foreign magical signature, she said without preamble. Harry nearly tripped over his own feet. What? I can see magical auras, Wednesday explained matter-of-factly. Yours has a parasite, a fragment of something else attached to it. Didn't you know? Harry stared at her, his mouth dry. No, what do you mean, a fragment of something else? Wednesday studied him clinically. Soul magic. Crude, but effective. Someone tried to bind their life force to yours, or through yours. Interesting approach to immortality, though my family prefers more elegant methods. Harry felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Before he could ask more questions, they had reached the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom where Dumbledore was beginning the tour. At Hogwarts, we divide magical education into distinct subjects, the headmaster was explaining. Defense Against the Dark Arts focuses on protection against harmful magic and magical creatures. Gomez examined the classroom with interest. Specialized defensive training. Fascinating approach. In our tradition, every spell has both creative and destructive applications, the distinction is merely in intent. Which can make teaching standardized ethical guidelines challenging, Dumbledore observed diplomatically. Ethics are relative, Headmaster, Morticia said with a small smile. What your society considers dark magic is often simply magic your ancestors found too difficult to regulate. A provocative perspective, Dumbledore acknowledged. Though one that raises legitimate concerns about safety and societal harmony. Safety is overrated, Uncle Fester declared cheerfully. My best inventions came from catastrophic accidents. Percy looked horrified. Arthur attempted to hide a smile. As the tour continued, the fundamental differences between the two magical traditions became increasingly apparent. The Addamses viewed Hogwarts' structured curriculum with polite interest but obvious bewilderment at its compartmentalized approach. The ministry officials, meanwhile, struggled to reconcile the Addamses' casual relationship with forces they had been taught to fear. When they reached the astronomy tower, Gomez became particularly animated. Celestial magic, he exclaimed, examining the telescopes. The cornerstone of so many family rituals. Tish and I were married during a complete lunar eclipse, doubled our magical connection and caused that delightful thunderstorm that lasted for 3 weeks. You can influence weather through celestial alignments? McGonagall asked, unable to hide her academic interest despite her reservations. Influence, direct, manifest, Gomez confirmed enthusiastically. The cosmos is the greatest source of magical amplification. Why, during the quadruple planetary convergence of 1843, great-grandfather Addams raised an entire mountain range in Nevada. Muggles still can't explain how it got there. Amelia Bones cleared her throat. Mr. Addams, such large-scale magical manifestations would constitute serious violations of the International Statute of Secrecy. Statute of? Oh, that modern thing, Gomez waved dismissively. The Addams family has always operated outside such constraints. Our estate is protected by perceptual confusion fields, Muggles see only what their minds can accept. That doesn't sound ministry-approved, Percy muttered. It predates your ministry by several centuries, Wednesday pointed out flatly. Tension was clearly building as the tour continued. The fundamental incompatibility between the ministry's regulatory approach and the Addamses' freeform magical philosophy became increasingly evident. By the time they reached the library, Percy was taking copious notes about potential statutory violations, while Hermione was practically vibrating with excitement over the magical theories being casually discussed. In the library, Pugsley spotted the restricted section and immediately made a beeline for it. "Ah! The dangerous books," he said gleefully. "We keep ours in the nursery." "The nursery?" McGonagall looked alarmed. "For bedtime reading," Wednesday explained. "Mother says a proper education begins with understanding the really lethal stuff first, so you know what to avoid." "Or perfect." As Pugsley reached for the chain blocking the restricted section, Madame Pants materialized as if from nowhere, her expression thunderous. "Touch that chain, young man, and you'll regret it," she hissed. To everyone's surprise, Pugsley looked delighted by the threat. "Is it cursed? Will my fingers fall off? Or maybe turn into snakes? We have a bookcase at home that does that." Madame Pants blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "It sets off an alarm." "Oh." Pugsley looked disappointed. "That's boring." "I apologize for my son," Morticia said smoothly. "In our family library, the truly dangerous books are protected by much more creative deterrence." "Like what?" Ron asked, unable to help himself. "Our copy of Necromantic Rituals of the Third Dynasty tries to consume the reader's life force," Wednesday offered. "And Dimensional Gateways for Beginners temporarily transports unauthorized users to a pocket dimension filled with carnivorous plants. It's very effective for teaching proper library etiquette," Morticia added with a serene smile. Madame Pants looked torn between horror and professional interest. The tension that had been building finally came to a head when they reached the potions classroom. Professor Snape was there, preparing ingredients for the coming term. He looked up with his customary scowl as the large group entered. "Ah, Severus," Dumbledore said cheerfully. "Allow me to introduce the Addams family. They're visiting to discuss alternative magical traditions." Snape's dark eyes swept over the unusual family. "Indeed. A potions master," Grandmama exclaimed, shuffling forward to inspect Snape's work. "Let's see what you've got here, young man." Before anyone could stop her, she was examining his ingredients, occasionally tsking disapprovingly. "Eye of Newt. How pedestrian. Try Eye of Basilisk, much more potent." Snape's expression darkened. "Basilisk eyes are Class A non-tradable substances." "Bureaucracy," Grandmama waved dismissively. "We grow basilisks in the conservatory. Wonderful for garden pest control, and their venom makes an excellent spot remover." Percy made a strangled noise and scribbled furiously on his clipboard. "And what's this?" Grandmama picked up a vial of prepared potion. "Wolfsbane. Very basic formula." Snape's eye twitched. "That basic formula took 12 years of research to perfect." Sure, Grandmama nodded patronizingly. "But you're missing the lunar reflectivity component. Add powdered moonstone harvested during the dark of the moon, stir 13 times widdershins with a silver rod dipped in virgin's tears, and the werewolf keeps their human consciousness for the entire lunar cycle, not just during the full moon." A shocked silence fell over the room. Even Snape looked stunned. That's not possible," Hermione finally whispered. "Lycanthropy is tied directly to the full moon's influence. Only because modern potion-making ignores the sympathetic resonance between lunar phases and human transmutation," Grandmama explained, as if it were obvious. "The Addams family has been curing werewolves since the Middle Ages. Well, not curing, improving. Why be a werewolf only 3 nights a month when you could access those abilities anytime? You can control the werewolf transformation?" Dumbledore asked, his casual tone belied by the sudden intensity in his eyes. "Control, enhance, reverse," Grandmama confirmed. It's all in understanding the fundamental magical connections rather than just the surface symptoms. Percy had gone from looking horrified to calculating. If such a potion could be properly tested and regulated. Regulated, Pa. Grandmama spat. That's your problem right there. You modern wizards want to put everything in neat little boxes. Magic doesn't work that way. It's wild, unpredictable, interconnected. Wild and unpredictable magic is precisely what our regulations are designed to control, Amelia Bones said firmly. For the safety of all. And in doing so, you've lost access to half of what magic can do, Gomez countered, his normal joviality giving way to surprising seriousness. Your ancestors understood this. The founders of this very school practiced magic that would be forbidden by your ministry today. That's a baseless claim, Percy objected. Is it? Wednesday's cold voice cut through the argument. The wards around this castle contain blood magic at their foundation. I can feel it. The stones themselves remember the sacrifices made to protect them. Dumbledore didn't contradict her. The founding of Hogwarts occurred in a different era, with different magical understandings. Exactly our point. Gomez exclaimed. Magic evolves, adapts, transforms. But your ministry has frozen it in place, cutting off entire branches of possibility. The disagreement might have escalated further, but at that moment, a silvery lynx patronus bounded into the room and spoke with Kingsley Shacklebolt's voice, emergency at the ministry. Zalthazor's containment has been breached. Similar entities detected throughout Britain. Dumbledore needed immediately. All eyes turned to Uncle Fester, who patted his pocket with a confused expression. But he's right here. Safe and sound. He reached in and pulled out the glowing purple orb, which seemed perfectly intact. That's impossible, Amelia Bones declared. Unless Zalthazor was merely a scout, Morticia finished grimly. The first of many. It's beginning, Wednesday said tonelessly. The invasion we warned about in 1702. No one believed great-great-grandmother Prudentia then either. What invasion? Dumbledore asked sharply. The convergence, Gomez explained, all humor gone from his face. When the barriers between dimensions thin enough for cross-realm transit. It happens approximately once every 3 centuries. And your family knew this was coming? McGonagall demanded. Why do you think we came to Britain now? Morticia asked. Our ancestral lands sit on a dimensional nexus point. We returned to perform the necessary rituals to strengthen the barriers. The rituals you were prevented from performing because we tried to keep you out, Dumbledore realized, a grave expression settling over his features. Precisely, Gomez nodded. And now, I'm afraid, things are about to get rather complicated. The Ministry of Magic was in chaos when they arrived. Horrors ran in every direction, magical alarms blared, and in the center of the atrium, a swirling vortex of purple energy hung suspended in midair, growing larger by the minute. Sweet Merlin's beard, Arthur whispered as their group emerged from the fireplaces. Not Merlin, Wednesday corrected. Something much older. Minister Fudge spotted them and hurried over, his face ashen. Dumbledore. Thank goodness. These things are appearing all over Britain. The unspeakables say they're breaches in the fabric of reality. Dimensional incursions, Gomez nodded sagely. Right on schedule. You knew this would happen. Fudge rounded on him furiously. You brought these monstrosities with you. On the contrary, Minister, Morticia replied calmly. We came to prevent this. Had we been allowed to perform the necessary rituals at our estate, rituals our family has conducted every 3 centuries since before Hogwarts was built, this could have been avoided. Fudge sputtered incoherently while Dumbledore took command. What can be done now? He asked the Addamses directly. The nexus points must be sealed, Gomez explained, watching as the vortex pulsated ominously. There are 7 major nexus points across Britain where the dimensional barriers are thinnest. We can provide their locations, Morticia added, but sealing them requires our family's specific magical approach. Your conventional spells won't affect extradimensional energies. Then we'll work together, Dumbledore decided. A combined approach, your knowledge with our resources. Percy looked like he wanted to object but was silenced by a stern look from his father. We need to hurry, Wednesday warned, pointing at the vortex. Once they establish a stable gateway, the entities will begin physical manifestation. As if on cue, a long, spindly limb emerged from the swirling purple energy, followed by another, and another. A creature vaguely resembling the one they'd contained at the Addams mansion, but larger and with more appendages, began pulling itself into their reality. Fascinating specimen. Uncle Fester exclaimed. Multidimensional physiognomy with non-Euclidean skeletal structure. Fester, Morticia chided gently. Not the time for scientific observation. Right, he nodded, reaching into his coat and pulling out several devices similar to the ones Pugsley had used at the mansion. Who wants to help me set the compression field? Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged glances. They had come along to observe, but it was clear the situation had escalated far beyond a simple cultural exchange. We need to help, Harry said firmly. Whatever way we can. Absolutely not, McGonagall objected. You're students, not Aurors. Actually, Wednesday interjected, age is irrelevant for the rituals we need to perform. Magical potential matters more than years lived. These three have considerable power. Out of the question, Fudge blustered. Children involved in interdimensional containment. I won't authorize, with respect, Minister, Dumbledore interrupted, we are facing an unprecedented situation. If the Addams family believes these young people can contribute meaningfully, they can serve as anchor points, Morticia explained. Their untrained magical signatures are actually advantageous, more flexible, less constrained by standardized patterns. Before Fudge could object further, more alarms blared. A ministry worker ran up, looking terrified. Minister. Reports coming in, manifestations at Hogsmeade, Diagon Alley, Stonehenge, Godric's Hollow, the Isle of Avalon, the Giant's Causeway, and, he gulped, the Department of Mysteries. The 7 nexus points, Grandmama nodded. Right where they should be. Fudge looked like he might faint. This is a disaster of unprecedented proportions. The International Statute of Secrecy will be irrelevant if interdimensional entities overrun Britain, Dumbledore said firmly. Minister, I suggest you authorize whatever measures the Addams family recommends. Immediately. Faced with the growing creature emerging from the vortex, and similar reports from across Britain, Fudge capitulated. Fine. Do whatever you must. But the ministry accepts no responsibility for, excellent. Gomez clapped his hands together. We'll need 7 teams, 1 for each nexus point. Each team must include at least 1 Addams and several of your wizards. The rituals must be performed simultaneously at the moment of astral alignment, which gives us approximately 3 hours. With remarkable efficiency for a family that seemed so chaotic, the Addamses began organizing the response. Morticia conjured an ancient star chart that hovered in midair, showing the approaching alignment. Gomez distributed strange artifacts from what appeared to be an ordinary carpetbag but somehow contained items far too large to fit normally. Wednesday and Pugsley prepared ritual components with practiced precision. Uncle Fester and Grandmama demonstrated the necessary gestures and incantations to bewildered ministry wizards. I'll take the Department of Mysteries, Morticia declared. The barriers there are already structured for interdimensional research. Amelia Bones, Unspeakable Croaker, and Miss Granger would be ideal team members. Hermione's eyes widened. Me. Your analytical approach to magic will help stabilize the ritual framework, Morticia explained. And your open-minded curiosity is exactly what's needed when working with forces beyond conventional understanding. Stonehenge for me. Gomez announced cheerfully. The ancient ley lines provide excellent magical conductivity. Dumbledore, care to join me? Along with Mr. Potter. Harry looked surprised but nodded firmly. I'll take Godric's Hollow, Wednesday stated flatly. I need Arthur Weasley and Ronald Weasley. Family connections amplify magical resonance. Ron glanced at his father, who looked equally surprised but didn't object. Isle of Avalon for me. Uncle Fester declared. The residual magic from Merlin's time will give my electricity a nice boost. I'll take Minerva McGonagall and Kingsley Shacklebolt. The Giant's Causeway for me, Grandmama cackled. I'll need Severus Snape, potions will be essential for this ritual, and Percy Weasley. Percy looked horrified at being paired with the elderly witch, but straightened his shoulders resolutely. Pugsley, you take Hogsmeade with Lurch, Morticia instructed her son. Take Minister Fudge and Dolores Umbridge. Fudge and Umbridge looked even more horrified than Percy. And Thing will handle Diagon Alley with a team of Aurors, Gomez finished. Any questions? The Great Hall at Hogwarts had been converted into an emergency command center. Maps of Britain covered the tables, with glowing markers indicating the 7 nexus points. Teams gathered, receiving last-minute instructions before departing for their assigned locations. Hermione found herself reviewing an ancient text with Morticia, struggling to comprehend the complex ritual requirements. Mrs. Addams, she asked quietly, why did this entity, Zalthazor, appear as Merlin to warn Dumbledore against your family? Morticia's dark eyes studied her thoughtfully. A clever deception. These entities have attempted to enter our dimension for millennia. The Addams family has always stood as guardians at the threshold between worlds, a role we inherited from our ancestors. So it wanted to prevent you from protecting the nexus points. Precisely. By turning Britain's wizarding community against us, it ensured we couldn't perform the necessary rituals when the dimensional barriers began to thin. Nearby, Harry was receiving instructions from Gomez, who demonstrated a series of complex hand gestures. Remember, my boy, intent matters more than precision. Magic responds to will more than form. That contradicts everything I've been taught at Hogwarts, Harry said, attempting to mimic the gestures. Of course it does. Gomez grinned. Modern magical education focuses on standardization, making every wizard produce identical results through identical methods. Our approach embraces individual magical signatures. Ron, meanwhile, was being evaluated by Wednesday, who circled him with unnerving intensity. Your magical aura has unusual patterns, she observed. Connected to your emotions. Interesting. Is that good? Ron asked uncertainly. It's useful for our purposes, Wednesday replied. Emotional magic is more primal, less constrained by rational limitations. Arthur watched this exchange with a mixture of concern and fascination. The Ministry has spent centuries developing standardized magical education precisely to avoid the unpredictable outcomes of emotionally driven magic. And in doing so, limited your potential, Wednesday countered. Emotional magic is more powerful, if more dangerous. That's why it's regulated, Percy interjected from where he was reluctantly accepting a vial of suspicious liquid from Grandmama. Regulation doesn't eliminate danger, Wednesday said flatly. It merely creates the illusion of control. As the hour for departure approached, Dumbledore called for everyone's attention. We face an unprecedented threat, he said gravely. But also an unprecedented opportunity, to witness the integration of magical traditions separated for centuries. Whatever your reservations about the Addams family's methods, I ask you to set them aside. Today, we must work together or fall separately. Gomez stepped forward, unusually serious. The rituals must begin precisely as Mercury aligns with Saturn, 76 minutes from now. Each team will establish a containment circle, perform the binding incantations, and channel the dimensional energies back through their point of origin. Be warned, Morticia added, these entities will resist. They've waited centuries for this opportunity. They will attempt to disrupt the rituals by any means necessary, including targeting your deepest fears or desires. So basically, Ron summarized, We're performing weird ancient magic we don't understand to stop monsters from another dimension from invading, and they're going to try to mess with our heads while we do it? Precisely, Wednesday nodded approvingly. Traditional Addams family entertainment. Brilliant, Ron muttered. Just brilliant. As the teams prepared for departure, Dumbledore approached the Addams parents. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I acted on information I should have questioned more thoroughly. Water under the bridge, Headmaster. Gomez declared magnanimously. Nothing brings people together like an interdimensional crisis. If we survive this, Dumbledore continued, I hope you'll consider sharing more of your magical knowledge. There is clearly much we could learn from each other. We'd be delighted, Morticia smiled. The Addams family has always valued magical education, simply in our own unique way. With final preparations complete, the teams gathered around their respective portkeys, specially modified by the Addamses to function through the growing dimensional disturbances. Remember, Gomez called out as they prepared to depart, no matter what you see, what you hear, what you feel, complete the ritual. The fate of both our dimensions depends on it. Well, Harry said to Ron and Hermione as they stood with their assigned teams, at least things are never boring. Good luck, Hermione said nervously. You too, Ron nodded. Try not to get possessed by interdimensional whatevers. Portkeys activate in 3, 2, 1. Gomez counted down. With 7 simultaneous pops, the teams vanished, each heading toward their nexus point, and whatever awaited them there. The Department of Mysteries hummed with unusual energy as Morticia, Hermione, Amelia Bones, and Croaker materialized in the circular entrance chamber. The normally black doors were vibrating, and a purple glow emanated from beneath one of them. The Veil Room, Croaker said immediately. The dimensional disturbance is centered there. Of course, Morticia nodded. A permanent gateway between realms would naturally be the weakest point. As they approached the door, Hermione felt a creeping sense of dread. Mrs. Addams, what exactly are we going to find in there? The entity attempting to cross over will take different forms at each nexus, Morticia explained, her voice perfectly calm. It will manifest according to the specific magical properties of each location. And here? At the Veil? Death magic, Morticia said, a hint of appreciation in her tone. My specialty. They entered the Veil Room to find the ancient stone archway pulsing with energy. The tattered veil that normally hung limply now billowed violently, as if in a strong wind. Purple lightning crackled around it, and whispers, hundreds of overlapping voices, filled the air. It's beautiful, Morticia murmured. It's trying to fully materialize, Croaker warned, checking some instrument he'd brought. The dimensional breach is at 64% and growing. We must establish the containment circle immediately, Morticia instructed, removing several items from a black velvet bag. Miss Granger, take these and place them at the cardinal points around the veil. Hermione accepted what appeared to be 4 human finger bones, trying not to think too hard about their origin. Madam Bones, this incense must be lit simultaneously at each marker once they're placed, Morticia continued, handing the witch several black candles and a censer of strange-smelling herbs. And me? Croaker asked. You will monitor the dimensional readings and alert us to any sudden changes, Morticia said. Your familiarity with this department gives you the best chance of detecting subtle shifts. As Hermione carefully placed the finger bones at the north, east, south, and west points around the veil, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. She caught fragments of familiar voices, her parents, Harry, Ron, professors, all calling to her. Ignore the voices, Morticia advised, noticing her hesitation. They're not real, merely the entity attempting to distract you. They sound so real, Hermione whispered. The entities feed on emotional resonance, Morticia explained, arranging ritual components on a small altar she'd conjured. They find the connections that bind you to others and exploit them. Once the circle was established and the incense lit, the whispers changed, becoming angry, threatening. The purple lightning intensified, striking dangerously close to them. "It knows what we're doing," Amelia Bones observed grimly, her wand ready. "Good," Morticia smiled slightly. "That means it's working." She began an incantation in a language Hermione didn't recognize, her hands weaving complex patterns in the air. The finger bones began to glow with an eerie blue light, and lines of force connected them, forming a glowing circle around the veil. "Now, Miss Granger," Morticia instructed. "I need you to think of the most logical, ordered system you know, mathematical equations, potion recipes, anything with strict rules and patterns." "Why?" Hermione asked, even as she began mentally reciting arithmancy formulas. "These entities exist outside conventional physical laws," Morticia explained, continuing her hand movements. "Imposing structured thought creates a framework they cannot easily penetrate." As Hermione focused on complex numerical sequences, she felt something brush against her mind, a foreign presence, seeking entry. "It's trying to get in my head," she gasped. "Don't fight it directly," Morticia advised calmly. "Simply continue your structured thinking. The patterns create a barrier." The presence grew more insistent, showing her images, her friends in danger, her parents forgetting her entirely, her knowledge failing when needed most, playing on her deepest fears. Hermione gritted her teeth and mentally recited the 12 uses of dragon's blood, followed by the precise wand movements for transfiguring mammals into inanimate objects, then the exact ingredients and brewing instructions for polyjuice potion. The presence receded slightly. "Excellent," Morticia approved. "Madam Bones, we need a containment spell, not to trap the entity, but to create a magical framework it must navigate." Amelia nodded and began casting complex binding charms around the perimeter of their circle. Unlike standard containment spells, she wasn't trying to create an impenetrable barrier, but rather a magical maze, a structured pathway the entity would be forced to follow. "The alignment approaches," Croaker warned, checking a pocket watch with multiple hands. 3 minutes remaining. The veil was now bulging outward, as if something enormous was pressing against it from the other side. The stone archway cracked in several places, magical energy bleeding through the fissures. "When Mercury aligns with Saturn, the entity will attempt a complete materialization," Morticia explained. "That's when we must perform the reversal ritual. Before then, we need to weaken its connection to this realm." She withdrew a silver dagger from her sleeve, ornately carved with symbols that seemed to move when viewed directly. With elegant precision, she cut her own palm, allowing several drops of blood to fall onto the ritual altar. "Family blood," she explained, seeing Hermione's alarmed expression. "The Addams lineage carries magical properties specifically attuned to interdimensional barriers." The blood sizzled when it hit the altar, then spread into patterns resembling the same symbols carved on the dagger. The whispers from the veil turned to howls of rage. "It recognizes the blood," Morticia said with satisfaction. "Miss Granger, continue your structured thinking but add an element of transition, processes that change one state to another." Hermione focused on transfiguration sequences, mentally visualizing the precise stages of matter transformation. 30 seconds to alignment," Croaker announced tensely. The veil billowed violently, and something began to emerge, a mass of writhing limbs, eyes, and mouths, all shifting and reconfiguring in ways that hurt to look at directly. "It's coming through," Amelia shouted, reinforcing her spell matrix. "Right on schedule," Morticia said calmly. She raised her hands, the cut palms still dripping blood, and began the final incantation. "Families across 7 points, blood of the ancient guardians, by our will and ancient right, we seal the paths between worlds." As she spoke, the altar began to glow with increasing intensity. The finger bones at the cardinal points pulsed in synchrony. Hermione felt a pull on her magic, not draining it, but channeling it, directing it into the complex pattern Morticia was weaving. "Now, Miss Granger," Morticia instructed. "Imagine the most orderly reversal you can conceive, a spell being undone step by step, a potion deconstructed ingredient by ingredient." Hermione closed her eyes, visualizing complex magic being methodically dismantled. Around her, she could feel the others lending their power to the ritual, Amelia's disciplined magical strength, Croaker's specialized knowledge of the department's mysteries, and Morticia's ancient, blood-bound power. "The alignment is happening," Croaker announced. The entity roared, a sound that existed in multiple frequencies simultaneously, some too low to hear properly, others painfully high. It pushed further through the veil, its form a violation of natural law. Containment at all 7 points, Morticia intoned, her voice taking on an echoing quality. "By earth and sky, by blood and bone, by the 7 stars of the ancient covenant, we command the barriers restored." The altar erupted in blue fire that shot toward the ceiling, then split into 7 distinct beams that angled outward, connecting, Hermione realized, to the other 6 ritual sites across Britain. The entity shrieked and thrashed, caught between dimensions. For a moment, Hermione feared the ritual had failed, the creature was still half-emerged, still fighting. Then she felt it, a massive surge of magical energy flowing through the network the Addamses had created. Not just their power, but magic from Hogwarts, from Stonehenge, from all the ancient places of Britain, channeled through the 7 teams performing the ritual simultaneously. The entity began to be pushed backward, fighting every inch. As it retreated, its form fluctuated wildly, briefly showing hundreds of different appearances, some human, some monstrous, some utterly alien. "It's working!" Amelia exclaimed. "Of course it is," Morticia said with perfect confidence. "The old magic never fails when properly applied." With a final, reality-distorting shriek, the entity was forced back through the veil. The archway glowed brilliantly for a moment, then settled back into its normal, slightly decrepit state. The tattered veil hung motionless once more. Hermione realized she was breathing hard, as if she'd run a great distance. Is it over?" At this nexus, yes, Morticia nodded, already collecting her ritual items. "Now we must wait to hear from the others." That was. Amelia seemed at a loss for words. "I've never seen magic like that." "Few living wizards have," Morticia agreed. "This knowledge has been preserved only in certain families, those who maintained the old ways when the rest of the wizarding world embraced standardization." "It was incredible," Hermione said sincerely. "The way you integrated multiple magical principles into a cohesive system, it contradicts everything I've read about spell construction being dependent on linguistic and gestural precision. Modern magical theory is built on artificial constraints," Morticia explained, looking pleased with Hermione's observation. "Useful for teaching, but ultimately limiting. True magic flows from intention and connection, not rigid formulas." "That's dangerously close to suggesting magic is subjective," Croaker said, though his tone held more academic interest than criticism. "Not subjective," Morticia corrected. "Relational. Magic exists in the connections between things, between intention and outcome, between wizard and wand, between blood and bone." She smiled at Hermione. "Your generation could rediscover these principles, with the right guidance." Before they could discuss further, a silver lynx Patronus bounded into the chamber. "Giant's Causeway secured," came Kingsley's voice. "Returning to Hogwarts." One by one, similar messages arrived from the other teams: Stonehenge, Hogsmeade, Godric's Hollow, the Isle of Avalon, and Diagon Alley. Each nexus had been successfully sealed. "It seems our collaboration was a success," Amelia observed, looking at Morticia with newfound respect. "Indeed," Morticia agreed. "Perhaps this crisis will help your ministry reconsider its position on alternative magical traditions." "I believe that conversation has already begun," Amelia said diplomatically. As they prepared to return to Hogwarts, Hermione found herself full of questions. The ritual had revealed possibilities in magic she'd never considered, connections and principles absent from her textbooks. "Mrs. Addams," she asked hesitantly, "would your family consider teaching some of this knowledge? Not to replace our current system, but to complement it?" Morticia's dark eyes sparkled with approval. "My dear, I believe that's exactly what's needed. Magic thrives on diversity, after all. Back at Hogwarts, the Great Hall buzzed with excited conversation as the 7 teams returned, each with their own tale of the ritual they'd performed. "You should have seen it," Ron was telling anyone who would listen. "This huge tentacle thing came out of the ground in Godric's Hollow, and Wednesday just stared at it and said, 'You're late,' like she was scolding it for missing tea time." "The Isle of Avalon was magnificent," McGonagall said, looking slightly disheveled but invigorated. "Uncle Fester's electrical abilities interacted with the ancient magic in ways I would have considered impossible." "Thing was amazing in Diagon Alley," Kingsley reported. "A disembodied hand performing complex ritual gestures, the entity didn't know what to make of it." Harry sat quietly, processing his experience at Stonehenge. The ancient monument had amplified the ritual magic in unexpected ways, creating effects he could still feel resonating through him. "You okay?" Hermione asked, sitting beside him. "Yeah, just thinking," Harry replied. "Gomez showed me things about magic I never imagined. It was like everything I've learned at Hogwarts is just one small piece of something much bigger." "I know exactly what you mean," Hermione nodded eagerly. Morticia explained magic as relational rather than formulaic. "It changes everything about how we should understand spellcasting." Ron joined them, still buzzing with excitement. "Wednesday says I have an interesting magical aura, because of my family connections. Apparently being part of a big wizarding family creates unique magical signatures. The Addamses seem to put a lot of importance on family magic," Hermione observed. "It's the foundation of their entire system," Harry said. Gomez explained that magic flows through bloodlines, gathering power and characteristics over generations. "Isn't that basically what purebloods believe?" Ron asked, lowering his voice. "Similar concept, completely different application," Hermione clarified. "They don't think magical blood makes them superior, just that family connections create specific magical resonances that can be utilized." At the head table, Dumbledore was in deep conversation with Gomez and Morticia. Fudge, looking thoroughly overwhelmed by his experience with Pugsley, nodded along weakly. "The fact remains," Percy was saying loudly to Arthur, "that regardless of today's events, many of their magical practices violate current ministry regulations." "Perhaps the regulations need revisiting," Arthur suggested mildly. "Revisiting?" Umbridge's voice rose shrilly. "These people animate corpses, communicate with the dead, and perform blood rituals. We cannot simply save Britain from interdimensional invasion." Wednesday suggested flatly, appearing behind Umbridge without warning. The woman jumped and whirled around. "Young lady, you should not be eavesdropping on adult conversations." "I wasn't eavesdropping," Wednesday replied. "I was waiting for an opportunity to inform you that your magical aura indicates significant repression of natural abilities. The pink is a giveaway." Umbridge sputtered indignantly while several nearby listeners struggled to hide their amusement. Dumbledore stood, calling for attention. The hall gradually quieted. "Today, we have witnessed something extraordinary," he announced. "Not just the successful defense against an interdimensional threat, but the reunion of magical traditions separated for centuries. The Addams family has demonstrated abilities that many believed lost to time, abilities that proved essential when our conventional magic failed." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered witches and wizards. "Minister Fudge and I have discussed the situation at length," Dumbledore continued. "We are in agreement that the original ban against the Addams family was based on incomplete, and, we now know, deliberately misleading, information." Fudge nodded, though he still looked slightly dazed. "Therefore, the ban is officially lifted. The Addams family is welcome to remain at their ancestral estate in Britain, with the understanding that they will assist the ministry in establishing appropriate guidelines for the safe practice of their unique magical traditions." "Guidelines, not regulations," Gomez clarified cheerfully. "We're happy to explain the safety principles, but some things simply can't be standardized." "We will also be establishing an exchange program," Dumbledore announced. A limited number of Hogwarts students and staff will have the opportunity to study traditional magic with the Addams family, while the Addams children will attend selected classes at Hogwarts. This caused significant excitement, particularly among the younger witches and wizards present. "Blimey," Ron whispered. "Can you imagine Wednesday in Hogwarts classes?" "I'm more concerned about Pugsley and potions with Snape," Harry replied. "Or worse, care of magical creatures with Hagrid." "They'll get along splendidly," Hermione predicted. "They share a common appreciation for dangerous creatures." As the formal announcements concluded, the gathering transitioned to a celebratory atmosphere. House elves brought out food and drinks, and the tension of the day gave way to relief and curiosity. Ministry officials who had participated in the rituals found themselves recounting their experiences with growing enthusiasm rather than apprehension. "I still don't understand how your family maintained these magical traditions when they disappeared from Britain," Hermione said to Wednesday, who had joined them at their table. "We never standardized," Wednesday explained simply. "When wand-based magic became dominant in Europe, many families abandoned their traditional practices to conform. The Addamses refused." "Why?" Harry asked. Wednesday considered him with her unerringly steady gaze. "Because some magic cannot be performed with wands. Some connections, to death, to blood, to the earth itself, require more direct channels." "But is it safe?" Hermione pressed. "These powers seem volatile." "Magic isn't meant to be safe," Wednesday replied. "It's meant to be magic." Before they could discuss further, Pugsley bounded over, his pockets bulging suspiciously. "Wednesday. Uncle Fester says we can set up a lightning collection rod on the astronomy tower. Professor Flitwick's going to help." Wednesday's expression didn't change, but something like enthusiasm flickered in her dark eyes. "Excellent. I'll bring my conductivity measurement tools." As the Addams siblings departed, Ron shook his head in amazement. "Mental, the lot of them. Brilliant, but completely mental." "I'm not sure Hogwarts will ever be the same," Harry observed, watching as Uncle Fester demonstrated something to an increasingly alarmed Professor McGonagall that involved his lightbulb trick. "That might be exactly what we need," Hermione said thoughtfully. "After all, different doesn't mean dark." "Miss Granger is quite right," came Morticia's voice as she approached their table. "The wizarding world's fear of different magical approaches has led to the loss of powerful traditions that once coexisted peacefully." "Mrs. Addams," Hermione began eagerly, "I have so many questions about your family's approach to magical theory, and I look forward to addressing them," Morticia assured her with a warm smile. "But first, I wanted to speak with Mr. Potter about something his team encountered at Stonehenge." Harry looked up in surprise. "Me?" "Yes. Gomez mentioned that during the ritual, you displayed an unusual magical resonance with the entity, as if part of you recognized part of it." Harry shifted uncomfortably, remembering the strange sensation he'd felt, like something inside him had reached out toward the interdimensional creature. "Wednesday noted something similar when we first met," Harry admitted. "She said my scar contains a foreign magical signature." Morticia's expression grew serious. "May I?" She gestured toward his forehead. Harry hesitated, then nodded. Morticia's cool fingers lightly traced his lightning scar. Her eyes widened slightly. "Fascinating," she murmured. "Soul magic, crudely executed but powerful. A fragment, torn and attached without proper anchoring rituals." "What does that mean?" Harry asked, his mouth suddenly dry. "It means, Mr. Potter, that someone attempted a form of immortality by fracturing their soul, and a piece of it resides within you." Morticia withdrew her hand. "In our tradition, soul magic is sacred, performed only with full awareness and consent. This was something else." "Voldemort," Harry whispered. "The night he couldn't kill you," Hermione realized, her face paling. "Something happened with his soul." "Indeed," Morticia nodded. "And given what we've learned today about dimensional barriers and magical connections, I believe this requires further investigation." With your permission, Mr. Potter, my family would like to examine this connection more thoroughly. Harry swallowed hard. Can you remove it? Perhaps, Morticia said carefully. Soul magic is complex, but the Addams family has centuries of experience with the boundaries between life, death, and other states of existence. Other states? Ron repeated skeptically. Death isn't binary, Mr. Weasley, Morticia explained. There are numerous intermediate conditions: suspended animation, partial embodiment, spiritual displacement, soul fragmentation. You're describing Horcruxes, came Dumbledore's voice as the headmaster joined their conversation. His expression was grave. A most dark and forbidden magic. Forbidden, yes. But not unknown or unstudied, Morticia replied calmly. The Addams family archives contain extensive research on soul magic, both its uses and countermeasures. Dumbledore seemed to age before their eyes. I have suspected something similar about Harry's scar for some time, but lacked the specific knowledge to confirm it. You knew? Harry asked, hurt and anger mingling in his voice. I had theories, Dumbledore said heavily. But no certainty, and no solution that didn't carry terrible risks. My family may be able to help, Morticia offered. Our approach to soul magic differs significantly from conventional wizarding understanding. Dumbledore studied her for a long moment. I believe we have much to discuss, Mrs. Addams. Perhaps after the celebrations have concluded? Of course, Morticia agreed. This is a delicate matter requiring proper attention. As they moved away to continue their conversation privately, Harry sat in stunned silence. A soul fragment, he finally said. I've been carrying a piece of Voldemort's soul for 13 years. But now there might be a way to remove it, Hermione pointed out, trying to sound encouraging. If anyone would know about this kind of magic, it sounds like the Addams family would. They're weird, mate, but they know their stuff, Ron added supportively. Did you see how they handled those interdimensional whatsits? If they can do that, sorting out your scar should be easy. Harry wasn't entirely convinced, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope regarding his connection to Voldemort. If conventional wizarding magic couldn't solve the problem, perhaps the Addams' unconventional approach could. Across the Great Hall, Gomez was entertaining a group of ministry officials with an animated retelling of the Stonehenge ritual, complete with dramatic reenactments. Uncle Fester and Pugsley were showing fascinated students how to create handheld balls of lightning. Grandmama had cornered Professor Snape and was lecturing him on the proper use of grave moss in regenerative potions. And Thing was winning tremendous popularity by serving drinks with theatrical flair. You know, Harry said, watching the scene, I think Hogwarts is about to get a lot more interesting. Mental, Ron repeated, but he was grinning. Completely mental. I can't wait for the library exchange, Hermione admitted. Imagine what books the Addams family must have in their collection. Just be careful they don't bite, Harry warned with a smile. Or try to possess you. Or transport you to another dimension. I'll take my chances, Hermione said firmly. Some knowledge is worth the risk. As the celebration continued into the evening, an unusual sense of harmony settled over the gathering. The initial fear and suspicion had given way to cautious appreciation, even admiration. The Addams family, with all their eccentricities and unsettling practices, had proven themselves not just allies but potentially valuable teachers. The old magic was returning to Britain, not as a threat, but as a reminder of forgotten possibilities. And for Harry, Ron, and Hermione, the coming school year promised to be unlike any they had experienced before. Outside, storm clouds gathered over Hogwarts as Uncle Fester's lightning rod began its work. Wednesday and Pugsley watched from the astronomy tower, their faces illuminated by occasional flashes of lightning. They're not ready for what's coming, Wednesday observed tonelessly. No one ever is, Pugsley agreed cheerfully. That's what makes it fun. Chapter 3, The Truth Unbound. The morning after the interdimensional crisis found Britain's magical community in chaos. The Daily Prophet's front page screamed with competing headlines: Interdimensional invasion thwarted, mysterious American family saves Wizarding Britain, ministry officials divided on response, ancient magic returns. What does this mean for magical Britain? In the Great Hall at Hogwarts, Harry pushed the newspaper aside and rubbed his eyes. He'd barely slept, his dreams filled with swirling purple vortices and whispers that sounded disturbingly like Voldemort's voice. The revelation about his scar carrying a fragment of the Dark Lord's soul had left him deeply unsettled. "You look awful," Ron observed helpfully, piling sausages onto his plate despite the early hour. "Thanks," Harry replied dryly. "Couldn't sleep." "Understandable," Hermione said, scanning her own copy of the Prophet. "Learning you've been carrying a piece of Voldemort around for 13 years isn't exactly conducive to peaceful rest." Ron winced. "Do you have to say it so bluntly? Would you prefer I use euphemisms?" Hermione asked. "Harry's special forehead friend? The Dark Lord's sole roommate?" Despite everything, Harry snorted with laughter. "Please don't ever call it that again." Arthur Weasley approached their table, looking tired but excited. "Good morning. What a night, eh? I've been in emergency meetings since dawn. The ministry's in an absolute uproar." "What's happening?" Harry asked. "Everything at once," Arthur sighed, helping himself to a cup of tea. "Half the Wizengamot wants to award the Addams family an Order of Merlin for saving us. The other half wants to reinstate the ban immediately. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement is fielding reports of residual dimensional anomalies across Britain. The Unspeakables are demanding access to the Addams family's ritual knowledge. And international magical governments are bombarding us with questions." "Where are the Addamses now?" Hermione asked. "That's the strange part," Arthur frowned. "They seem to have disappeared." "Disappeared?" Ron repeated. "How?" "Their whole house is here." "Actually, it's not," Arthur replied. "Their mansion vanished sometime during the night. Just gone, leaving nothing but an empty field where it stood." "That's impossible," Hermione stated. "You can't just vanish an entire building that size without massive magical signatures." "Apparently, the Addams family can," Arthur shrugged. "Dumbledore doesn't seem surprised, though he's being rather cryptic about it. Says they haven't gone far." Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. There was something significant in that statement. "Dad, is something wrong with Dumbledore?" Ron asked carefully. "He seemed off last night. After everything with the Addamses and the revelations about Harry." Arthur hesitated. "Between us, Dumbledore's taking this situation hard. The fact that he was so thoroughly deceived by that entity masquerading as Merlin has shaken him. He sequestered himself in his office, reviewing memories and ancient texts. Says he needs to understand how he could have missed the signs." "It's not his fault," Harry said. "That thing fooled everyone." "Not everyone," Hermione pointed out quietly. "The Addams family recognized it immediately." "Which raises other questions," Arthur nodded. "Questions Dumbledore is now asking himself. If their magical knowledge could identify a threat his couldn't, what else might have been overlooked in our rush to standardize magical education?" Before they could discuss further, Professor McGonagall approached, looking even more severe than usual. "Mr. Potter, Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley, the headmaster requests your presence in his office immediately." She glanced at Arthur. "You as well, Arthur, if you can spare the time." "Has something happened?" Hermione asked anxiously. McGonagall's lips thinned. "The headmaster has made certain discoveries that he wishes to discuss with you." Dumbledore's office was in disarray, a stark contrast to its usual meticulous organization. Books lay open on every surface, strange instruments whirred and puffed smoke, and the pensieve sat prominently on his desk, its silvery contents swirling. The headmaster himself looked uncharacteristically disheveled. His half-moon spectacles sat slightly askew, and his silver hair and beard weren't as neatly groomed as usual. "Ah, thank you for coming so promptly," he greeted them, waving distractedly at chairs. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." "Professor, is everything all right?" Hermione asked cautiously. "No, Miss Granger, I don't believe it is," Dumbledore replied with surprising candor. "I have spent the night examining my memories of the entity that appeared to me as Merlin, comparing them with historical accounts and the information provided by the Addams family. The discrepancies are troubling." "What kind of discrepancies?" Harry asked. "Inconsistencies in magical signature, historical knowledge, even speech patterns," Dumbledore explained. "The entity knew things the real Merlin would have known, details about the founding of Hogwarts, early wizarding conflicts, the establishment of the first magical governance. But it spoke of them with subtle inaccuracies, as if working from secondary sources rather than personal memory." "You think it studied wizarding history to impersonate Merlin more effectively?" Arthur suggested. "Precisely," Dumbledore nodded. "But why go to such lengths? Why not simply attack directly, as it did yesterday? Why the elaborate deception specifically targeted at preventing the Addams family from establishing themselves in Britain?" "Because they could recognize it," Hermione realized. "Their magical tradition would have identified it immediately. And more importantly, they possessed the knowledge to counter it," Dumbledore agreed. "Knowledge lost to mainstream wizarding society for centuries." He rose and began pacing, his long robes swishing across the cluttered floor. "I have been consulting the oldest records available, journals from the Founder's era, fragments of documents that predate Hogwarts itself. And I discovered something remarkable." He paused, turning to face them. There was indeed a conflict between Merlin and certain magical families. But it wasn't about dark magic, as our histories suggest. It was about standardization. "Standardization?" Ron repeated, confused. "Like, making everyone do magic the same way?" "Exactly, Mr. Weasley," Dumbledore nodded approvingly. "Merlin believed that for magical society to thrive, it needed structure, consistency, reproducible results. He advocated for the widespread adoption of wand-based spellcasting with standardized incantations, the foundation of our current magical education." "And some families objected," Harry guessed. "Indeed. They argued that magic was inherently diverse, that bloodlines, geographical connections, ancestral practices all created unique magical signatures that couldn't and shouldn't be forced into a single mold." Dumbledore sighed heavily. The Addams family was among the most vocal dissenters, but they weren't alone. "So what happened?" Hermione asked, leaning forward eagerly. "A compromise, of sorts. Most families eventually adopted the standardized system for its practical benefits in teaching and community building. But some, like the Addamses, maintained their traditional practices while agreeing to certain concessions, primarily related to secrecy and non-interference. And this entity, Zalthazor, wanted to prevent the Addams family from returning to Britain because..." Arthur prompted. Dumbledore's blue eyes grew troubled. "That is where the historical record becomes fragmented. There are references to a conflict far older than Merlin, something the earliest magical families encountered and collectively contained. The texts call it the Devourer Between Worlds." "Zalthazor," Harry whispered. "Or whatever name it used in ancient times," Dumbledore nodded. "The records suggest it feeds on magical energy, not just any magic, but the living, evolving magic that comes from diversity and innovation. The very thing standardization reduced," Hermione concluded, her eyes widening. "By formalizing magical education around a single system, we inadvertently weakened the magical ecosystem," Dumbledore finished gravely. "Like planting only one crop in a field, efficient, but vulnerable. So this thing has been, starving for centuries because we all use the same kind of magic?" Ron asked skeptically. "Not starving, Mr. Weasley. Waiting. Gathering strength in the spaces between dimensions." Dumbledore returned to his desk and gestured to an ancient, crumbling scroll. According to this fragment, certain families, the Addamses prominent among them, took on the role of guardians at dimensional boundaries, performing rituals during critical celestial alignments to maintain the barriers. The ritual they came back to perform, Harry realized. The one we helped with yesterday. Yes. But something interfered with this cycle. Dumbledore's expression darkened. I believe Zalthazor found a way to influence our world subtly, to corrupt fragments of magical entities with strong connections to our reality. Like Merlin's ghost, Arthur said slowly. Precisely. Not the true spirit of Merlin, but a corrupted echo, a magical impression twisted to serve Zalthazor's purposes. Dumbledore removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes tiredly. And I, in my arrogance, never questioned it. The appearance of Merlin, the greatest wizard in British history, appealed to my scholarly vanity. I accepted its warnings at face value. You couldn't have known, Harry said firmly. I should have questioned more deeply, Dumbledore replied. The signs were there. The entity's excessive focus on the Addams family. Its insistence on keeping them from Britain at precisely the time when the dimensional barriers were weakening. He sighed heavily. Instead, I became its unwitting accomplice. An uncomfortable silence fell over the office, broken only by the soft whirring of Dumbledore's silver instruments. Finally, Arthur spoke. What do we do now? The Addamses have vanished, the Ministry is in chaos, and we still don't know if these dimensional incursions are truly over. I suspect they are not, Dumbledore said grimly. Yesterday's rituals closed the immediate breaches but did not address the underlying weakness in the barriers. For that, we need the Addams family's ancestral knowledge. His eyes twinkled suddenly. And I believe I know where to find them. The fifth-floor corridor was rarely visited by students or staff. It contained mostly unused classrooms and storage spaces, with nothing to distinguish it from dozens of similar hallways throughout the castle. Yet Dumbledore led their small group directly to a blank stone wall between two dusty tapestries. Professor? Hermione asked uncertainly. There's nothing here. Appearances can be deceptive, Miss Granger, Dumbledore replied with a hint of his usual good humor. Particularly in a castle as magical as Hogwarts. He placed his palm against the seemingly solid wall and spoke in a language none of them recognized, guttural yet fluid, with strange cadences that seemed to echo oddly in the corridor. The stones began to shift, not sliding apart as with the entrance to Diagon Alley, but seeming to fold into themselves, creating impossible angles that hurt the eyes if viewed directly. Within moments, an ornate doorway stood where blank wall had been, its frame carved with symbols similar to those they had seen during the Addamses' rituals. What did you say? Harry asked, amazed. I simply greeted the castle in its original tongue, Dumbledore explained. Before standardized Latin-based incantations, the founders and their contemporaries used older languages for their most significant enchantments. But how did you know this was here? Arthur wondered. I didn't, not specifically, Dumbledore admitted. But yesterday, Gomez Addams mentioned something about his family's connection to Hogwarts that piqued my curiosity. It sent me searching through the oldest architectural plans of the castle. And? Hermione prompted. And I discovered that Hogwarts originally included living quarters for visiting magical families, those who practiced different traditions but contributed to the school's founding. These spaces were designed to accommodate their specific magical needs. Dumbledore gestured to the doorway. Over centuries, as standardized magic became universal, these areas fell out of use and were eventually hidden away, forgotten by most, but still part of the castle. And you think the Addamses are using one of these spaces now? Harry asked. I believe they've reclaimed what was always partially theirs, Dumbledore corrected. Shall we? He gestured toward the doorway. Beyond the threshold lay not a room but a corridor, one that clearly shouldn't have fit in the space available. Its architecture was similar to Hogwarts yet distinctly different, darker, more Gothic, with sweeping arches and strange geometric patterns embedded in the stonework. Torches burned with blue-green flames, casting eerie shadows. Wicked, Ron whispered, his voice echoing slightly. They followed the corridor as it curved gently leftward. The air grew cooler, carrying scents of exotic herbs and something metallic. Finally, they emerged into a vast circular chamber that left them all speechless. The room soared upward at least 3 stories, its domed ceiling painted with astronomical charts that actually moved, showing the real-time positions of planets and stars. The walls were lined with bookshelves containing ancient tomes, interspersed with alcoves holding bizarre artifacts and specimens in jars. A massive circular table occupied the center, covered with maps, scrolls, and ritual implements. And around the table stood the Addams family, looking completely at home. Dumbledore! Gomez exclaimed cheerfully. Right on schedule. We were just discussing when you'd figure it out. Mr. Addams, Dumbledore inclined his head respectfully. I see you've rediscovered your family's quarters at Hogwarts. Rediscovered? Morticia corrected gently. We never truly lost them. The knowledge of this place has been passed down through generations, though I must say, it has been well preserved despite centuries of disuse. The castle remembers its original families, Wednesday added, looking up from an ancient text she'd been studying. Blood calls to stone. I confess I was surprised to learn of the Addams family's historical connection to Hogwarts, Dumbledore said. Our modern records contain no mention of it. History is written by the victors, headmaster, Grandmama cackled from where she stirred a cauldron in the corner. And in the battle over magical standardization, your side won. Not my side, precisely, Dumbledore murmured. That conflict predates me by many centuries. But your point is well taken. Harry looked around in amazement. The chamber reminded him somewhat of the Room of Requirement, but more permanent, more established, as if the very stones had been saturated with magic over countless generations. Nice digs, Ron commented, eyeing a suit of armor that seemed to be made entirely of bones. Very, homey. Thank you, dear, Morticia smiled. The Addams ancestral chamber at Hogwarts has always emphasized the comfort of darkness and the aesthetic of elegant decay. Hermione had already gravitated toward the bookshelves, her eyes wide with academic lust. These texts, some of them look older than anything in the Hogwarts library. Many are, Wednesday confirmed, joining her. Our family has preserved magical knowledge from traditions largely abandoned by modern wizardry. Some predate wand use entirely. Dumbledore cleared his throat. While I'm fascinated by this historical rediscovery, I must address the more urgent matter. My research suggests that yesterday's rituals, while successful in closing the immediate dimensional breaches, did not resolve the underlying weakness in the barriers. Correct, Gomez nodded, suddenly serious. Zalthazor was merely the advance scout, the first wave. The dimensional barriers remain dangerously thin after centuries without proper maintenance. Then we need to strengthen them permanently, Harry said. It's not that simple, Morticia explained. The barriers were originally maintained through a balance of magical diversity. Different families, different traditions, all contributing their unique magical signatures to create a tapestry of protection. But with magical standardization, Hermione began. The tapestry became a single thread, Wednesday finished flatly. Efficient but fragile. Which is exactly what Zalthazor wanted, Arthur realized. A magical monoculture, vulnerable to his specific type of attack. So how do we fix it? Ron asked pragmatically. Gomez spread a large, complex star chart on the table. The full dimensional alignment occurs tonight, when 7 celestial bodies perfectly align with the 7 major ley line conjunctions in Britain. That's our opportunity to permanently reinforce the barriers. But doing so requires something that hasn't existed in Britain for centuries, Morticia added. A true confluence of diverse magical traditions, working in harmony. Modern wizardry and ancient family magic, Dumbledore surmised. Working together rather than in opposition. Precisely. Gomez clapped his hands together. A magical alliance like in the old days, before standardization created artificial divisions between acceptable and unacceptable forms of magic. Harry stepped forward. I want to help. Whatever needs to be done. Me too, Ron nodded firmly. And me, Hermione added. Your assistance would be invaluable, Morticia said with a warm smile. Particularly yours, Mr. Potter. Harry tensed slightly. Because of, what's in my scar? Partly, Morticia acknowledged. The soul fragment you carry creates a unique magical signature, one that will actually strengthen the ritual rather than weaken it. I don't understand, Harry frowned. How can carrying a piece of Voldemort help? Magical diversity, dear, Morticia explained. Your aura contains two distinct magical signatures intertwined in a way that shouldn't be possible by conventional understanding. It's precisely the kind of magical anomaly that reinforces dimensional barriers. So my condition is actually useful for once? Harry asked incredulously. For this specific purpose, yes, Wednesday confirmed. Though we should still remove it afterward. Having another wizard's soul fragment embedded in your forehead is generally inadvisable for long-term health. You can really remove it? Harry couldn't keep the hope from his voice. Of course, Grandmama called from her cauldron. Soul extraction is basic Addams family magic. We learn it before table manners. Which explains a lot about their table manners, Ron muttered to Harry, who stifled a laugh. Dumbledore stepped forward, examining the star chart with interest. This ritual will require participation from across magical Britain, not just those of us in this room. Indeed, Gomez agreed. We'll need representatives at each of the 7 major ley line conjunctions, the same locations we used yesterday, but with expanded ritual circles. The ministry will need to be involved, Arthur pointed out. And they're still divided on how to approach your family's magic. Then perhaps it's time I address the Wizengamot directly, Dumbledore said decisively. With the Addams family present to demonstrate exactly what we're facing. Uncle Fester, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly perked up. Ooh! A formal presentation. Can I bring Zalthazor? He's been so well behaved in his containment sphere. He patted his coat pocket, which emitted an angry purple glow and what sounded disturbingly like muffled cursing in an inhuman language. Actually, Morticia said thoughtfully, that might be precisely what the ministry needs to see. The emergency session of the Wizengamot was already in progress when the great doors of the chamber burst open. All heads turned as Dumbledore entered, followed by the Addams family in all their macabre glory. Gomez wore a formal pinstriped suit that somehow managed to look both antique and timeless. Morticia glided beside him in a black gown that seemed to absorb light. Wednesday and Pugsley, Grandmama, Uncle Fester, Lurch, and even Thing completed the entourage. Behind them came Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Arthur Weasley. Minister Fudge, presiding from the central podium, looked thoroughly discomfited. Albus! What is the meaning of this? The Wizengamot is in closed session discussing the interdimensional crisis. Which is precisely why we are here, Cornelius, Dumbledore replied calmly. I present to you the family whose ancestral knowledge offers our best hope of resolving that crisis permanently. Murmurs swept through the chamber. Some faces showed fear or suspicion, others curiosity, a few open hostility. The Addamses have not been summoned to this session, Dolores Umbridge simpered from beside Fudge. Their presence constitutes an irregularity in, stuff it, Dolores, Amelia Bones interrupted bluntly from her seat in the Wizengamot. If they can save us from more of those tentacled horrors, I want to hear what they have to say. A chorus of agreement rose from several members. Very well, Fudge conceded reluctantly. You may address the Wizengamot, Headmaster. Thank you, Minister, but I believe Mr. Addams should speak first, Dumbledore said, stepping aside. This is, after all, his family's area of expertise. Gomez bounded forward, his energy filling the austere chamber. Distinguished wizards and witches. What a pleasure to address such an august body. I haven't seen a governmental assembly this impressive since the Transylvanian Blood Council of 1756, though they had better refreshments. He winked at Fudge. No offense, Minister. Fudge sputtered indignantly. I'll be brief, Gomez continued, suddenly serious. The interdimensional entity you faced yesterday, Zalthazor, is merely the harbinger of a larger invasion. The barriers between dimensions are failing after centuries of neglect, and tonight's rare celestial alignment presents both our greatest vulnerability and our only opportunity to permanently repair them. If these barriers are so important, an elderly wizard called out, why hasn't the ministry known about them? Why isn't their maintenance part of our magical responsibilities? An excellent question. Gomez beamed. Tish, shall you explain, or shall I? Allow me, darling, Morticia stepped forward, her presence somehow commanding immediate attention despite her soft voice. The dimensional barriers were originally maintained by a coalition of ancient magical families, each contributing their unique magical approaches to a complex network of protections. When magical standardization became the norm in Britain, knowledge of these barriers, and the diverse magical practices needed to maintain them, was gradually lost. Are you suggesting our ancestors deliberately abandoned crucial protective magic? Amelia Bones asked skeptically. Not deliberately, Morticia clarified. But in their quest for uniformity and control, they prioritized magical practices that could be easily regulated and taught. The older, wilder magics, blood magic, celestial alignments, communion with death, became stigmatized, then regulated, then forgotten by all but a few families who maintained their traditions in exile. Families like yours, Fudge said accusingly. Precisely, Morticia smiled, showing no offense. The Addams family has served as guardians of dimensional boundaries for over 2,000 years. We return to Britain every 3 centuries to perform the necessary reinforcement rituals during specific celestial alignments. Which is what that thing, disguised as Merlin, tried to prevent, Harry added, stepping forward despite whispers at his unexpected presence. It tricked us into keeping out the very people who could recognize and stop it. Mr. Potter, Umbridge said with poisonous sweetness, this is a Wizengamot session, not a school debate club. Children should be seen and not, Mr. Potter's perspective is highly relevant, Dumbledore interrupted firmly. As are those of Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger, who participated directly in yesterday's containment rituals. And who will be essential to tonight's reinforcement ritual, Wednesday added flatly, her cold gaze sweeping the chamber. Unless you prefer dimensional collapse and the end of reality as you understand it. Her matter-of-fact delivery of this apocalyptic statement created a moment of stunned silence. Perhaps a demonstration would be helpful, Uncle Fester suggested brightly, already reaching for his pocket. I've got Zalthazor right here. No, shouted several Wizengamot members simultaneously. Just a tiny peek. Fester looked disappointed. What Mr. Addams is proposing, Dumbledore smoothly redirected, is a coordinated ritual at 7 key locations across Britain, a ritual combining standardized wizardry with the Addams family's ancient magical practices. Together, they will create a permanent reinforcement of the dimensional barriers. And we're simply expected to trust that these, unconventional magical practitioners know what they're doing. Percy Weasley asked from his seat near Fudge. You trusted us yesterday when tentacled horrors were pouring into your ministry, Wednesday pointed out. Or would you have preferred to handle that situation with standardized shield charms? Percy flushed but had no rebuttal. The choice before us is simple, Dumbledore continued. We can either embrace the opportunity for magical cooperation, or we can face the consequences of dimensional collapse alone. I know which option I prefer. Debate erupted across the chamber. Some wizards argued vehemently against legitimizing dark magical practices, while others pointed out the practical success of yesterday's rituals. Through it all, the Addams family stood calmly, seemingly unbothered by the controversy they'd sparked. Order! Order! Fudge finally shouted, pounding his gavel. We will put this to a vote. Those in favor of authorizing cooperation with the Addams family for tonight's ritual. Hands raised throughout the chamber, not unanimously, but a clear majority. Those opposed? A smaller but significant number of hands rose, including Umbridge and several older members of traditionally conservative families. Fudge sighed heavily. The motion passes. The Ministry of Magic will officially cooperate with the Addams family in tonight's ritual to reinforce dimensional barriers. Capital! Gomez exclaimed. Now, we have much to prepare and very little time. We'll need 7 teams, specific ritual components, and... He glanced at Harry, one special participant central to all locations. Harry felt a chill run down his spine. Me? Yes, Mr. Potter, Morticia confirmed. Your unique magical signature, carrying both your own essence and the fragment of another, creates a perfect focal point for the converging rituals. What exactly will this ritual involve? Dumbledore asked, his tone carefully neutral but his eyes suddenly sharp. Nothing harmful, Morticia assured him. Mr. Potter will simply serve as the magical nexus, the point where all 7 ritual sites connect their energies. Like the hub of a wheel, Hermione realized. With the 7 sites forming the spokes. Precisely, Miss Granger, Morticia smiled approvingly. And afterward? Harry asked. You mentioned removing the soul fragment. A hush fell over the chamber. Many of the Wizengamot members looked confused or alarmed. Soul fragment? Fudge repeated. What soul fragment? Perhaps we should discuss the details privately, Dumbledore suggested smoothly. Nonsense. Gomez declared. Magical secrecy is what got us into this mess in the first place. Mr. Potter carries a fragment of Voldemort's soul in his scar, has since the night his parents died. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations and horrified gasps. That's preposterous. Fudge shouted over the din, Albus, tell them this is nonsense. But Dumbledore's grave expression confirmed the truth. I have long suspected something of this nature, he admitted. The Addams family, with their specialized knowledge of soul magic, confirmed it yesterday. And you didn't think to inform the Ministry? Umbridge demanded shrilly. The Ministry has historically demonstrated limited understanding of soul magic, Wednesday stated flatly. Your classification system labels it dark rather than recognizing it as simply ancient and powerful. Because it is dark. Percy insisted. Soul manipulation is among the most forbidden branches of magic. Only because you don't understand it, Grandmama cackled. Like calling fire evil because you can burn yourself. Soul magic built the foundations of your society, it's in the very stones of Hogwarts, in the painting enchantments that preserve personality after death, in family magic that passes through bloodlines. What matters now, Dumbledore interjected firmly, is that Harry's condition presents both a challenge and an opportunity. For tonight's ritual, the soul fragment's presence will actually strengthen the magical network we need to create. And afterward, Morticia added, we can safely remove it using methods developed by our family over centuries of studying the boundaries between life, death, and other states of being. Harry stepped forward, facing the Wizengamot directly. I want to do this, he said clearly. Both parts. If my condition can help protect everyone, then I'll do whatever's needed. And if the Addams family can remove Voldemort's soul fragment afterward. He ignored the collective flinch at the name. Then that's even better. Silence fell across the chamber as the assembled witches and wizards absorbed the determination in the young man's voice. Well then, Fudge finally said, looking thoroughly uncomfortable, it appears we have a plan. Preparations consumed the rest of the day. Teams were formed for each of the 7 sites, combining Ministry officials, Order members, though Harry didn't yet know that's what they were called, Hogwarts staff, and members of the Addams family. Ritual components were gathered, some from the Addams' supplies, others from Ministry vaults, Hogwarts stores, and even private collections offered by Wizengamot members who recognized the gravity of the situation. Harry found himself in the Addams family's ancestral chamber at Hogwarts, being prepared for his role as the central nexus. Morticia and Wednesday worked around him, drawing complex symbols on his skin with a mixture that smelled of herbs, ash, and something metallic that might have been blood. These markings will help channel the converging energies safely through your magical core, Morticia explained as she painted an intricate pattern over his heart. Without them, the power surge would be unpleasant. By which she means fatal, Wednesday clarified, carefully drawing symbols along Harry's forearms. Your internal organs would liquefy while your skin simultaneously calcified. Wednesday, dear, Morticia chided gently. No need to frighten him. I'm not frightened, Harry said, though his dry mouth suggested otherwise. I just want to understand what's going to happen. You'll stand at the central convergence point, the Great Hall at Hogwarts, which sits directly above a major ley line intersection, Morticia explained. As the ritual begins at each of the 7 sites, magical energy will flow through established channels toward you. Your unique dual magical signature will harmonize these energies, allowing them to merge without conflict. Like tuning different instruments to the same key, Hermione suggested. She sat nearby with an ancient tome open on her lap, studying the ritual with fascination. An apt metaphor, Morticia smiled. The combined power will then flow from Harry into the dimensional weak points, reinforcing them with a blend of magical traditions that creates a far stronger barrier than either could establish alone. And my passenger? Harry asked hesitantly. The soul fragment will be temporarily activated by the ritual, Wednesday stated. You may experience some bleed-through of its consciousness. You mean I'll hear Voldemort in my head? Harry asked, alarmed. Possibly, Morticia acknowledged. But the symbols we're placing will maintain separation between your consciousness and his. You may hear or sense him, but he cannot possess or control you during the ritual. Harry swallowed hard but nodded. And afterward? The extraction will occur while the dimensional barriers are at their strongest, Morticia explained. The reinforced boundaries between realities will actually assist in separating the foreign soul fragment from your own. It's ideal timing, Wednesday added. The statistical probability of successful extraction increases by 78.3% during post-dimensional reinforcement. Harry nodded again, though the clinical discussion of ripping a piece of Voldemort's soul from his body did little to calm his nerves. Ron entered the chamber, looking bemused. Just saw Uncle Fester teaching Kingsley Shacklebolt how to channel lightning through his wand. Kingsley's eyebrows might never be the same. Fester gets enthusiastic about electrical conductivity, Morticia said fondly. How are the other preparations going? Hermione asked. Mental, Ron replied, shaking his head. The Ministry's actually working with the Addamses instead of fighting them. Pugsley's showing the unspeakable something called dimensional folding that has them practically drooling. Grandmama's brewing potions with Snape, who looks like he can't decide whether to be furious or take notes. And Dumbledore? Harry asked. Having the time of his life, Ron grinned. He and Gomez are swapping stories about magical theory that make absolutely no sense to anyone else. I think Dumbledore's actually sad he didn't meet the Addamses years ago. Perhaps this crisis will lead to lasting change in how magical Britain views alternative traditions, Hermione said hopefully. One revelation at a time, dear, Morticia smiled. Societies rarely change overnight. Unless there's a proper revolution, Wednesday suggested tonelessly. Those tend to accelerate social change quite efficiently. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Harry said quickly. As the final preparations were made, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ancestral chamber, Draco Malfoy, looking thoroughly uncomfortable to be there but determined nonetheless. Potter, he nodded stiffly. I heard about what you're doing. The ritual. Come to mock. Ron challenged immediately. Malfoy's pale face flushed. No, Weasley. I came because. He seemed to struggle with himself before continuing. Because my father has offered our family grimoire for the ritual. It contains records of pre-standardization magic practiced by the Malfoys before they came to Britain. Really? Hermione couldn't hide her surprise. "Don't look so shocked, Granger," Malfoy snapped. "My family understands the importance of magical heritage. And contrary to what you might think, we don't want dimensional collapse any more than you do." "Your contribution is most appreciated, young man," Morticia said graciously. "Family grimoires often contain magical approaches lost to general knowledge." Malfoy looked startled to be addressed directly by Morticia but managed a respectful nod. "My father said to tell you the Malfoy family recognizes the Addams' right of primacy in matters of dimensional maintenance." "Whatever that means." "It means your ancestors remembered the old agreements," Morticia smiled. "Please convey our appreciation." As Malfoy departed, Ron stared after him in disbelief. "What just happened?" "The beginning of magical cooperation," Hermione said thoughtfully. "Maybe there's hope after all." As dusk approached, the 7 teams departed for their assigned locations, each carrying specific ritual components and instructions. Dumbledore remained at Hogwarts with Harry, Morticia, and Wednesday, preparing the Great Hall for its role as the central nexus. The house tables had been removed, and in their place stood an intricate pattern laid out in silver powder, crushed herbs, and what looked suspiciously like bone meal. 7 channels radiated from a central circle, each pointing toward one of the distant ritual sites. Enchanted crystals hovered at key intersection points, already beginning to pulse with magical energy. "It's nearly time," Dumbledore observed, consulting an ornate astronomical device Gomez had provided. "The alignment begins in 17 minutes. Harry stood nervously at the edge of the central circle, the symbols painted on his skin tingling slightly. "What exactly do I do?" "Stand in the center," Morticia instructed. "Focus on your magical core, the sensation of your own power. The ritual will do the rest." "And if something goes wrong?" Harry couldn't help asking. "Improvise," Wednesday suggested flatly. "It's what we Addamses do best." Strangely, her deadpan confidence reassured him more than any detailed contingency plan might have. As Harry took his position in the center of the circle, Morticia and Wednesday began placing the final components, strange artifacts from the Addams collection, interspersed with more conventional magical items from Hogwarts stores. Dumbledore watched with undisguised fascination. "The integration of magical approaches is remarkable," he commented. "I see elements of traditional British wizardry alongside components I cannot even identify." "The strongest magic has always come from harmonious diversity," Morticia replied. "Something magical society once understood better than it does today." "A lesson we may be relearning," Dumbledore acknowledged. At precisely the appointed time, the ritual began. Harry felt it first as a warm tingling in his feet, magic rising from the ley lines beneath the castle, flowing up through his body. Then came 7 distinct pulses of energy, each slightly different in texture and temperature, flowing along the silver pathways toward him. "It's starting," Morticia announced. "The other sites have initiated their rituals." Harry closed his eyes, focusing on the sensations as instructed. The 7 magical streams approached him, swirling around his body like visible currents of colored light, though whether he was actually seeing them or merely sensing them, he couldn't tell. "Good," Wednesday's voice reached him as if from a distance. "The magical signatures are stable and complementary." The streams intensified, beginning to intertwine around Harry. He felt the symbols on his skin heating up, not painfully but noticeably, as they channeled the converging energies. Then, unexpectedly, his scar exploded with pain. Harry gasped, his eyes flying open. "Something's wrong." "The soul fragment is responding to the magical surge," Morticia observed, her voice still calm but her movements becoming more urgent. "Earlier than expected." "He knows what we're doing," Harry gritted through clenched teeth. "He's fighting it." Inside his mind, Harry could feel Voldemort's presence, more distinct than ever before, a cold, serpentine consciousness pushing against his own. "You cannot stop me, Potter," the voice hissed directly into his thoughts. "This ritual only makes me stronger." "Fight it, Harry," Dumbledore urged. "Focus on your own magic, your own self. Harry tried, but the pain was intensifying. The 7 streams of magical energy continued to converge on him, but now they juddered and sparked where they touched, no longer flowing harmoniously. The confluence is destabilizing, Wednesday reported. The soul fragment is creating dissonance in the magical network. He's doing it deliberately, Harry managed to say. Using the connection to sabotage the ritual. Morticia moved swiftly to a small altar set up nearby. We may need to perform the extraction now, rather than after the reinforcement. Is that possible? Dumbledore asked sharply. Possible but dangerous, Wednesday answered. Without the reinforced dimensional barriers in place, the extracted fragment could potentially escape rather than dissipate. Or seek another host, Morticia added grimly. The magical streams around Harry began to pulse erratically, throwing off sparks that scorched the stone floor. The pain in his scar had become almost blinding. We don't have a choice, Harry gasped. He's going to collapse the whole thing. Morticia and Wednesday exchanged a glance, then nodded in unison. They moved to opposite sides of Harry, raising their hands in mirrored gestures. Albus, Morticia called, we need a third point to complete the triangle. Your conventional magic will provide the necessary counterbalance to our family approach. Dumbledore moved into position without hesitation, drawing his wand. What must I do? Cast your most powerful containment spell, Morticia instructed. Not at Harry, but at the space directly above him. Create a cage for what emerges. Dumbledore nodded, his wand beginning to weave complex patterns in the air. As he did, Morticia and Wednesday began an eerie, harmonized chant in a language Harry didn't recognize, something that seemed to resonate in his bones rather than his ears. The pain in Harry's scar reached an unbearable crescendo. He felt as if his skull might split open. Voldemort's voice in his mind became a furious roar. Now! Morticia commanded. 3 magic struck simultaneously, Dumbledore's structured spell, precise and controlled, Morticia's ancient incantation, primal and bloodbound, and Wednesday's raw intent, youthful yet surprisingly powerful. They converged at Harry's forehead, directly over his scar. For one terrible moment, Harry felt as if he was being torn in two. Then came a sensation like a hook behind his navel, similar to a port key but localized entirely in his scar. Something ripped free. A cloud of oily black smoke erupted from Harry's forehead, coalescing into a writhing mass suspended in the air above him. Dumbledore's spell contained it within a cage of golden light, but the smoky entity thrashed violently, already seeking escape. The fragment is free, Wednesday announced dispassionately. But without a proper anchor, it will dissipate or seek a new host. The extraction has further destabilized the ritual confluence, Morticia observed, indicating the 7 streams of magic now whipping chaotically around the room. Harry, momentarily dizzy from the extraction, straightened with new determination. His head felt lighter, clearer than it had in, well, ever. We need to complete the original ritual. The confluence patterns are too disrupted, Wednesday countered. They need to be reharmonized. Then we'll reharmonize them, Harry said firmly. He looked up at the writhing soul fragment contained in Dumbledore's spell. And I think I know how. Before anyone could stop him, Harry stepped back into the center of the ritual circle and raised his hands toward the chaotic streams of magic. Rather than fighting their wild movements, he moved with them, like a conductor leading an orchestra through a complex passage. Harry, what are you doing? Dumbledore called out. Improvising, Harry replied, with a quick glance at Wednesday. The Addams way. Something had changed with the removal of the soul fragment. Harry could now sense the magical streams more clearly, could feel their distinct textures, temperatures, and rhythms. Where before they had been foreign forces flowing through him, now they felt like extensions of his own magic. The conventional approach seeks to control magic, Harry said, remembering something Gomez had told him during their preparation. The Addams approach seeks to dance with it. And dance he did, not physically, but magically. His own power reached out to the 7 streams, not forcing them into alignment but inviting them, guiding them, finding the natural harmonies between their diverse signatures. Remarkable, Morticia breathed. He's intuitively accessing core principles of ancient magic without formal training. His magical core is unshackled, Wednesday observed. Without the soul fragment interfering, his natural abilities are expressing themselves more purely. The chaotic streams gradually stabilized, once again flowing toward Harry in harmonious convergence. As they merged, they created a brilliant column of light that engulfed him completely. The confluence is re-established, Morticia announced. The dimensional reinforcement can proceed. But there was still the matter of Voldemort's extracted soul fragment, thrashing within Dumbledore's containment spell. As the combined magical energies flowed through Harry, he made a split-second decision. "Professor," he called to Dumbledore, "direct your containment spell into the confluence." Dumbledore's eyes widened as he understood Harry's intention. With precise control, he moved his wand, guiding the golden cage containing the soul fragment into the column of light surrounding Harry. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The fragment shrieked, a high, inhuman sound that made everyone's hair stand on end, as the combined magical energies from all 7 ritual sites engulfed it. The oily smoke writhed desperately, but against such concentrated power, it had no defense. "The dimensional energy is unmaking it," Wednesday observed with clinical interest. "Forcing it back to its constituent magical particles." "Not just unmaking," Morticia corrected. "Repurposing. Watch." Indeed, as the fragment disintegrated, its essence didn't simply vanish. Instead, it was absorbed into the confluence, its raw magical energy redirected and purified, becoming part of the very power being used to reinforce the dimensional barriers. "Poetic justice," Dumbledore remarked, a smile playing at his lips. Voldemort's own fragment, helping to seal the barriers against the very entity he unwittingly served. With the addition of the soul fragment's converted energy, the ritual reached its crescendo. The column of light surrounding Harry pulsed once, twice, then shot upward through the enchanted ceiling of the Great Hall, splitting into 7 distinct beams that arced toward the ritual sites across Britain. Harry felt the moment the dimensional barriers strengthened, not as a dramatic change, but as a subtle shifting, like the air pressure adjusting after a storm. The wild, chaotic energy that had been flowing through him smoothed and stabilized, finding its natural balance. "It's done," he said with quiet certainty. The light column gradually faded, leaving Harry standing in the center of the ritual circle. The symbols painted on his skin had vanished, apparently consumed by the magical process. His scar, for the first time since he could remember, didn't hurt at all, it felt like nothing more than an ordinary scar. "Did it work?" he asked, looking between Morticia, Wednesday, and Dumbledore. "Perfectly," Morticia confirmed, her dark eyes gleaming with approval. "The dimensional barriers have been reinforced with a blend of magical approaches that will make them far more resilient than before." "And Voldemort's soul fragment?" Harry asked, reaching up to touch his forehead. "Completely removed and repurposed," Wednesday stated. "Your scar is now just a scar." Relief flooded through Harry, relief so profound it made his knees weak. He sank down onto the stone floor, suddenly exhausted but exhilarated. "Harry!" The doors to the Great Hall burst open as Ron and Hermione rushed in, followed by the rest of the Weasleys, all looking windswept and excited. "The ritual worked!" Hermione exclaimed. "We could see the energy beam from Godric's Hollow, it was incredible." "Mate, you look different," Ron said, studying Harry's face. "Your scar." "It's just a scar now," Harry confirmed, unable to keep from grinning. "They removed the soul fragment." "And you're okay?" Hermione asked anxiously. "Better than okay," Harry assured her. "I feel lighter. Clearer. Like I've been carrying a weight I never knew about until it was gone." As the hall filled with people returning from the various ritual sites, the atmosphere became celebratory. Gomez bounded in, swept Morticia into a dramatic dip, and kissed her passionately. "Success," cara mia. Dimensional stability restored. The barrier's stronger than they've been in centuries. Indeed, my dear, Morticia smiled as he released her. And with unexpected benefits. She glanced meaningfully at Harry. Grandmama shuffled in behind them, cackling with satisfaction. Told you the boy would handle it. Strong magical core, that one. Would make a fine Addams. High praise indeed, Dumbledore remarked, his eyes twinkling. As the evening progressed, the mood shifted from celebration to reflection. Ministry officials, order members, Hogwarts staff, and the Addams family gathered in groups, discussing the implications of what they'd accomplished. So what happens now? Harry asked, sitting with his friends and the Addams parents in a quiet corner of the hall. Well, Mr. Potter, Morticia said thoughtfully, that depends largely on how magical Britain chooses to proceed. Today demonstrated the power of magical integration, what can be accomplished when different traditions work together rather than in opposition. The ministry's already talking about creating a new department, Arthur reported, joining their conversation. The Department for Alternative Magical Practices. Still in the planning stages, of course, but the Wizengamot seems genuinely interested in preserving knowledge that was nearly lost. Progress, Gomez nodded approvingly. Though we Addamses have always found that the best magic happens outside departments and regulations. There's room for both approaches, Hermione suggested diplomatically. Structure and freedom, tradition and innovation. Balance, Harry agreed. Like what we achieved with the ritual. As they talked, Dumbledore approached with Minister Fudge, who looked simultaneously impressed and uncomfortable. Mr. and Mrs. Addams, Fudge began formally, on behalf of the Ministry of Magic, I wish to extend our gratitude for your family's assistance during this crisis. Your knowledge and unique magical approaches proved invaluable. Happy to help, Minister. Gomez replied cheerfully. Preventing dimensional collapse is an Addams family tradition. Yes, well, Fudge adjusted his lime green bowler hat nervously, the ministry would like to officially rescind the ban on your family's presence in Britain. You are welcome to maintain your ancestral property here, with the understanding that your magical practices will be conducted with appropriate discretion. How generous, Morticia murmured, a hint of irony in her voice. Though I believe our ancestral property rights predate your ministry by several centuries. Fudge cleared his throat awkwardly. Yes, well, legal technicalities aside, we hope this marks the beginning of more cooperative relations. I believe it already has, Dumbledore interjected smoothly. In fact, I've invited the Addams family to establish a limited presence at Hogwarts, to teach occasional seminars on pre-standardization magical approaches. Fudge looked alarmed. Albus, I'm not sure that's educational, Dumbledore finished firmly. The events of these past days have highlighted dangerous gaps in our magical knowledge, gaps that nearly led to disaster. I believe it's time our students learn that magic is far more diverse and adaptable than our current curriculum suggests. Besides, Wednesday added from where she'd silently appeared beside them, we've already reclaimed our family's ancestral chamber in the castle. It would be inefficient not to use it for educational purposes. Fudge looked like he wanted to object but couldn't quite find the words. Finally, he sighed in resignation. Very well. But I expect regular reports on what's being taught. As he walked away, Gomez chuckled. Politicians, identical across centuries and dimensions. What about you, Harry? Hermione asked quietly. How do you feel about everything? Harry considered the question seriously. The past few days had transformed his understanding of magic, introduced him to a family that defied all conventional wizarding norms, and, most significantly, freed him from the soul fragment he hadn't known he carried. I feel like I'm seeing clearly for the first time, he finally said. Not just about magic, but about myself. All these years, I've had this presence, influencing me without knowing it. The foreign magical signature would have affected your spell casting, your emotional responses, possibly even your magical development, Morticia explained gently. Which means... Harry looked up, a new determination in his eyes. I need to rediscover who I really am. What my magic can truly do without Voldemort's influence. An excellent perspective, Mr. Potter, Morticia approved. Self-discovery is the foundation of powerful magic. And we'd be delighted to offer guidance, Gomez added enthusiastically. The Addamses have centuries of experience with magical identity exploration. Why, Uncle Knick-Knack spent 40 years as a sentient shadow to better understand the nature of darkness. Harry laughed. I think I'll stick to more conventional methods, but thanks. The offer stands, Gomez winked. Sometimes the unconventional path leads to the most illuminating discoveries. As the evening drew to a close, the Addams family prepared to return to their ancestral chamber within Hogwarts. Before they departed, Morticia paused to speak privately with Harry. Mr. Potter, she said, her dark eyes serious, what you accomplished tonight was remarkable, not just surviving the soul extraction or completing the ritual, but intuitively blending magical approaches that most wizards consider incompatible. I just did what felt right, Harry shrugged. Precisely, Morticia smiled. And that instinct, to follow magical resonance rather than rigid rules, is the essence of the old ways. Should you wish to explore that aptitude further, our door is always open. Thank you, Harry said sincerely. For everything. Removing the soul fragment, helping with the dimensional crisis, for showing us a different way of looking at magic. Different doesn't mean dark, Morticia reminded him. It simply means other possibilities, other paths. Magic, at its core, is about possibilities. As the Addams family departed, Harry rejoined Ron and Hermione. Mental, Ron declared for perhaps the 100th time. Absolutely mental. But brilliant. They're certainly unique, Hermione agreed. But imagine what we could learn from them. Their understanding of magical theory challenges everything in our textbooks. I think that's the point, Harry said thoughtfully. Magic isn't just what's in textbooks or what we're taught at Hogwarts. It's bigger, older, wilder than that. Careful, mate, Ron grinned. You're starting to sound like an Addams. Harry laughed. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Weeks later, Hogwarts had settled into a new term, though one unlike any before it. The Addams family maintained their residence in the ancestral chamber, emerging occasionally to offer specialized seminars that quickly became the most talked-about events in the school. Gomez's lecture on nonlinear magical thinking and improvisation in crisis situations had students practicing magical approaches that would have given their regular professors heart attacks. Morticia's seminar on the magical properties of mortal remains was restricted to 6th and 7th years due to content but had a waiting list a mile long. Even Professor Snape was observed taking notes during Grandmama's demonstration of pre-modern potion techniques without standardized ingredients. Most popular of all, however, were Wednesday and Pugsley's practical workshops. Despite being technically students themselves, though they attended classes only sporadically, the Addams children displayed knowledge of magical applications that left their peers awestruck. Wednesday's session on practical applications of arachnid venom in defensive magic had even Draco Malfoy grudgingly impressed, while Pugsley's demonstration of controlled magical explosions for diversionary tactics had earned him the eternal admiration of Fred and George Weasley. For Harry, the weeks following the dimensional crisis and soul extraction had been transformative. With Morticia's guidance, he had begun exploring his own magical abilities anew, discovering that without Voldemort's fragment, his natural talents flowed more freely, particularly in areas requiring intuitive rather than structured approaches. You have a natural affinity for adaptive magic, Morticia had observed during one of their sessions. The ability to respond to magical situations instinctively rather than through memorized forms. This revelation had improved Harry's performance across nearly all his classes, even potions, where Snape had been grudgingly forced to acknowledge his suddenly improved intuition for ingredient interactions. The broader wizarding world, too, was gradually adjusting to the Addams family's presence. The Daily Prophet regularly featured articles debating the implications of alternative magical approaches, with opinions ranging from enthusiastic embrace to cautious acceptance to outright rejection. But the fact that such discussions were happening openly marked a significant shift in magical Britain's traditionally conservative stance. On this particular evening, Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat with Wednesday and Pugsley in the Great Hall after dinner, discussing the latest developments. "The Ministry's still trying to classify our family's magic according to their rigid categories," Wednesday remarked tonelessly. "It's like watching someone try to organize water by drawing lines on it." To be fair, Hermione pointed out, they're making an effort. The new classification system acknowledges family-specific magical traditions as valid approaches rather than potential dark arts. "Progress moves at the pace of a disemboweled snail," Wednesday replied. "But I suppose it's movement nonetheless." "I still can't believe Malfoy's father is leading the Wizengamot Committee on Ancestral Magical Practices," Ron said, shaking his head. "Since when do the Malfoys care about magical diversity?" "Since they realized their own family magic predates standardization," Pugsley explained, casually assembling what looked like a small explosive device on the table. "Self-interest is a powerful motivator." "Careful with that," Hermione cautioned, eyeing the device nervously. "It's just a dimensional pocket detector," Pugsley assured her. "For finding spatial anomalies. Mostly harmless." "Mostly?" Ron repeated skeptically. "There's a 12% chance of creating a temporary singularity," Wednesday stated. "But it would be very small. Probably wouldn't consume more than a few meters of matter." Hermione carefully moved her books further from Pugsley's project. Harry laughed, still marveling at how quickly the Addamses' casual relationship with danger had become almost normal to them all. "Has anyone heard from Dumbledore today? He was supposed to meet with your parents about something." "The Merlin situation," Wednesday confirmed. "They're attempting to determine whether any part of the real Merlin's spiritual essence was corrupted by Zalthazor, or if the entity simply created a complete fabrication." "Does it matter?" Ron asked. "Historical accuracy always matters," Hermione replied automatically. "And magical security," Pugsley added. "If Zalthazor could corrupt an actual historical figure's spiritual remnants, it might have done the same with others." This sobering thought momentarily silenced the group. "I don't think that's the case," came Morticia's voice as she glided up to their table. "Our research suggests that the Merlin that appeared to Albus was entirely constructed, a magical simulacrum designed to exploit his expectations and respect for historical authority." "That's somewhat reassuring," Hermione said. "Though it raises questions about other potential deceptions," Morticia acknowledged. "Which is why Gomez and Albus are establishing a detection system for similar magical forgeries." "Never a dull moment with you lot around," Ron observed. "Dullness is the enemy of magical innovation," came Gomez's cheerful voice as he bounded over, Dumbledore following at a more sedate pace. "Why, some of our family's greatest discoveries came from moments of absolute crisis. Great-Aunt Demogorgon invented teleportation while falling from a clock tower." "Did it work?" Harry asked, genuinely curious. "Partially," Wednesday replied. "We still found her legs at the base of the tower. But her torso materialized successfully in her bedroom." Ron choked on his pumpkin juice. "An outcome she found most satisfactory, as I recall," Gomez added nostalgically. "Allowed her to pursue her interest in human segmentation magic." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with amusement. "The Addams approach to magical experimentation continues to be, refreshingly unbounded by conventional caution. Life's no fun without a little risk, Headmaster," Gomez declared. "Speaking of which, we've been discussing the permanent integration of certain Addams family traditions into Hogwarts curriculum. Specifically, Dumbledore elaborated, a new course option for 6th and 7th years, alternative magical approaches, pre-standardization techniques and their modern applications." "That's brilliant!" Hermione exclaimed. "Will it be offered next year?" "If the Board of Governors approves," Dumbledore nodded. Though with Lucius Malfoy's surprising advocacy for ancestral magical practices, I believe approval is likely. Never thought I'd see the day when the Malfoys and the Addamses were on the same side of a magical policy issue, Ron remarked. Magical diversity makes for strange bedfellows, Morticia observed with a small smile. Though I suspect Mr. Malfoy's interest stems more from preserving his family's particular traditions than embracing the full spectrum of magical approaches. Still progress, Harry pointed out. Indeed, Mr. Potter, Dumbledore agreed. And speaking of progress, how are you finding your magic these days? Harry considered the question. Different. More, responsive. Like it's truly mine for the first time. An apt description, Morticia nodded approvingly. The removal of foreign magical influences often results in a period of magical recalibration, discovering your true magical signature without interference. It feels good, Harry said simply. Like I'm finally becoming who I was meant to be. A journey all young witches and wizards should take, Dumbledore said, though few have your specific circumstances. Or your innate talent for blending magical approaches, Morticia added. You've shown remarkable aptitude for integrating structured and intuitive magic, a skill that may prove invaluable in your future. Harry thought about his future, something that suddenly seemed both more uncertain and more promising than before. With Voldemort's soul fragment removed, was he still connected to the Dark Lord? Would prophecy still bind them? Or had the extraction changed the equation entirely? As if reading his thoughts, Dumbledore spoke gently. There is much we still don't know about how recent events may have altered certain predetermined paths. But I believe they have opened new possibilities, new choices that weren't available before. Fate is rarely as fixed as prophecies suggest, Morticia agreed. Magic, at its core, is about possibility, about transformation and change. Well, whatever happens, Ron declared loyally, we'll face it together. With a few Addams family explosives if necessary. He nodded at Pugsley, who beamed back. And proper research, Hermione added firmly. And improvisation, Harry concluded with a smile. The Addams way. Spoken like an honorary Addams. Gomez declared, clapping Harry on the shoulder. Now, who's up for a demonstration of dimensional fencing in the ancestral chamber? It's like regular fencing, but with the occasional spontaneous portal to the netherworld. As they followed the enthusiastic Gomez from the hall, Harry caught Dumbledore's eye. The headmaster nodded slightly, a look of quiet satisfaction on his face. Whatever the future held, Harry realized, magical Britain had been irrevocably changed by the Addams family's arrival. The boundaries between acceptable and unacceptable magic had blurred. Ancient knowledge was being rediscovered. New possibilities were emerging. And Harry himself, finally free of the burden he hadn't known he carried, was ready to explore them all. In the distance, thunder rumbled as Uncle Fester's lightning rod on the astronomy tower captured another bolt. Wednesday glanced up appreciatively. Perfect weather for raising the dead, she observed to no one in particular. Just a small resurrection, right? Harry asked cautiously. For educational purposes. Of course, Wednesday replied, her expression unchanged. Education is always our primary concern. As Harry followed his friends and the Addamses into their strange new future, he couldn't help but smile. Different didn't mean dark, after all. Sometimes, it just meant infinitely more interesting. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.